Committee room.
Good afternoon, members, and welcome to the 15th meeting of the Committee for Justice. The meeting is now open to the public, so we'll allow people to take their seats in the gallery. Just a reminder that the committee will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Everybody in the gallery is, of course, entitled to use their mobile phone as long as they're in airplane mode and devices are muted. Thank you very much. Stuart Dixon is joining us online, and we have apologies from Deirdre Hargey, who will be joining us later on in the meeting. Members, it's proposed that the oral evidence session with Research and Information Services, otherwise known as RAISE, and the oral evidence session with the Youth Justice Agency will be recorded by Hansard. Are members agreed? Thank you. Also, we're obliged to declare any financial or other relevant interests that might reasonably be thought by others to influence our approach to matters under consideration. Anybody who's got an interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now, or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. Does anybody have any interest they wish to declare?
EODs and police pensions. I've had correspondence with a former member of the service.
Likewise, Chair, and I've met the policing board with these same people, so declare an interest.
Okay, I'll also declare an interest in that regard. And could I declare too that I have an immediate family member who works in the legal profession? And I see there Sinead Ennis has joined us remotely as well. Hello Sinead, could you just confirm that you can see and hear us okay, please?
I can hear you, Chair.
That's great, thank you.
That's great.
I can hear myself now, and that's never pleasant. All right. Agenda item 1 is apologies, and as I said, we've received apologies from Deirdre, who's going to be late. Other than that, I'm not aware of any. Everybody's expected to be here, so we should see people as they're free. Agenda item 2 is draft minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of June 2024. So those are in the meeting pack at pages 5 to 14. Is everybody content that those minutes are a true and accurate reflection of that meeting on the 27th of June, if you can remember back that far? Yes, content? Thank you. Then I'll sign those off. Do we have any matters arising? We've got a couple. If I could ask you to turn to pages 16 to 24 of your meeting pack. The committee considered a statutory rule at its last meeting before the summer recess, which is incorporated in these minutes, which was the 27th of June, and that is SR 2024/138, the Police Pensions Remedial Service Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. At that time, the Examiner of Statutory Rules had not reported on the rule, and the committee agreed that, subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, it had no objection to the rule. The Examiner of Statutory Rules raised no concern regarding the technical aspects of the statutory rule in her report, and that was published on the 6th of September 2024. Are members content to note the report? Yes. Could I just check with the clerk? That's a different issue to this one, isn't it? It's a different rule. That's great, thank you. The only issue, I suppose, that I also would like to raise is I note that obviously one of our members has left us to go to Westminster. If members were agreed, I would like the committee to send a letter to Alex Easton MP to wish him well in his new endeavour and to thank him for his service to the committee. Are members content with that? Thank you. Thank you, members. So agenda item 4 then is the Research and Information Service oral briefing on mental health issues and the criminal justice system, and I would ask you to turn to pages 25 to 71 of your meeting pack for the relevant papers. Staff from RAISE are in attendance at the meeting to present us a paper on these issues. You'll remember that this was an area that the committee agreed to consider as a strategic priority whenever we had our planning day in May earlier this year. So I would like to welcome to the meeting Annabelle Reid, who's a Senior Research Officer, and Judith Bailey, who's the Justice Research Officer. So, ladies, I'm going to hand over to you. You'll have, I suppose, 10 to 15 minutes to give your presentation, then we'll take some questions. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Annabelle, so I'm the Senior Researcher here in RAISE, and alongside me is Judith. So we're here today to give you a really broad overview of mental health in the criminal justice system. And so for this briefing, we're going to provide some context around mental ill health in Northern Ireland before delving into a more specific focus on the criminal justice system, and that will include the most common groups of people that come into contact, and that includes professionals working, as well as people within the police, prison and probation systems, including victims. Finally, we're going to touch on some innovative approaches from other jurisdictions as well. Just to note up front that the scope of this paper was mental health of adults in the criminal justice system, and that will be the focus of our briefing here today. So Judith, can you just go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So let's first talk about mental health, mental ill health at population level. So the Northern Ireland Audit Office published a report in 2023 on mental health services in Northern Ireland, and there's really two, I suppose, key headline figures from that. So firstly, they reported that Northern Ireland has the highest prevalence of mental ill health in the UK. And really, the reasons behind that are twofold. So firstly, we have greater levels of deprivation here in Northern Ireland, which is a correlating factor. And then also, there's a link to the legacy of the Troubles and living in a post-conflict society. The second headline figure from that report was the cost of mental ill health in Northern Ireland, and that's estimated at 3.4 billion. So that wasn't in 2019, so in all likelihood that has increased since then. But the cost considers the wider costs to society, such as care and treatment of mental ill health, as well as lost production to the economy. So the Department of Health recognises mental illness as one of the 4 most significant causes of ill health and disability in Northern Ireland. And the other 3 causes are cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease and cancer. So in terms of funding, mental health services represents around 6% of our overall health and social care budget here. That report by the Audit Office flagged that mental health funding has not kept pace with increases in the wider health budget over time. But one important thing to consider before I hand over to Judith is that there is a scarcity of data when it comes to mental health, and that's not just within the criminal justice system, but that's across the board in Northern Ireland. And there has been, it has been the subject of a review by the Office for Statistics Regulation, and some of the work is underway in improving and harmonising how we collect that data. But initial estimates from that suggest that, in fact, Northern Ireland's prevalence of mental health aligns more closely with our other counterparts across the UK. So that figure that suggests that we have the highest prevalence might possibly be inflated. I'm now going to hand over to Judith, who is going to just have a little bit more of a focus on the criminal justice system.
Thanks, Annabelle, and thanks to the committee as well for the opportunity to present to you all today. So the achievement of the justice system's objectives are often complicated by having to provide mental health services to the public. There are a variety of complex health and social factors that may contribute to people coming into contact with the criminal justice system. So some highlighted on the screen here, but adverse childhood experiences, substance abuse, mental ill health. And the reality is that some of these people may not have been in contact with key services in the community before entering the justice system. So this is clearly a difficult issue, but it's also not a new one. Criminal Justice Inspection observed back in 2010 that mental ill health presents enormous challenges to the criminal justice system, and there's a clear risk that the justice system can become the service of last resort for those with mental health issues, which the Northern Ireland Audit Office observed in 2019. So next, we'll take a quick look at some of the approaches taken at a strategic level by the executive and government departments in relation to mental health in recent years. So the Department of Health has played a key role in this area with the Bamford Review that was published in 2007, and it intended to facilitate the development of a long-term plan for improved provision of mental health services. It also recommended the creation of a new legislative framework for mental capacity and mental health law, which resulted in the Mental Capacity Act 2016. So since the Bamford Review's publication, we've also seen major reviews into the transformation of health and social care delivery here, including Transforming Your Care in 2011, Bengoa Report in 2016, and both highlighted a number of challenges in relation to mental health services locally. So since 2020, the Executive has established a working group on mental wellbeing, resilience and suicide prevention. We've also seen the Department of Health appoint a mental health champion, as well as the publication of a 10-year mental health strategy by the Executive in 2021. And a funding plan was published alongside the strategy, which estimated the total cost of implementation at around 1.2 billion over its lifespan. Now, in terms of the criminal justice system, a number of specific strategies have been developed, which are discussed in further detail in the paper that was provided to you in advance of the meeting. But for now, it's worth highlighting that the Departments of Health and Justice jointly published an Improving Health Within Criminal Justice Strategy and Action Plan back in 2019. This appears to stem from a commitment contained in the Executive Strategic Framework for Public Health, Making Life Better, which ran from 2013 to 2023. So other relevant strategies in this space which are currently active include there's an adult restorative justice strategy running from 2022 to 27, a strategy for women and girls 2022 to 29, and prisons 25 by 25. And all of these highlight the interconnection between justice and health in terms of mental health service provision. However, one issue that a number of these strategies across health and justice largely have in common is significant funding challenges. So substantial additional and sustained investment is required to address the level of need in this area, including the availability of psychological therapies and access to services for people in times of mental health crisis. Finally, members will also be aware that just this week we've had the draft programme for government published, with safer communities identified as one of the 9 strategic priorities. There are a number of proposed actions relevant in this area, including a cross-governmental strategy to reduce offending and reoffending. And there's also reference to focus on preventing people from entering the justice system through early intervention, diversion and the use of community sentencing. And work to embed trauma-informed and responsive systems is also highlighted as an action to help people navigate and access support when they need it. This new document certainly offers potential opportunities to develop plans and targets relevant to mental health service provision and the criminal justice system. So on to the PSNI. That's obviously our largest criminal justice organisation and the main interface between the justice system and the community. And responding to mental health related incidents is becoming increasingly challenging for the service, particularly as its resourcing position has deteriorated in recent years. So you can see there are some figures on the slides, and they show that the number of hours the PSNI is spending in hospitals with people in mental health crisis, and also the number of mental health related calls being responded to as well. And it's worth just saying as well that these figures are likely not showing the full picture, as I know the service is engaged in further work around this at present. So what is the PSNI doing to try and address this issue? Well, it's currently working towards implementing the right care, right person model, and this is an operational model that seeks to direct people with health-related issues to the most appropriate service instead of police acting as the default first responder in cases. So to date, PSNI has established a Right Care, Right Person programme board and associated tactical group with a number of work streams. And the service also ran a 5-week data gathering exercise with frontline supervisors in June and July to try and capture more information around right care, right person type demand on the service. So it's also clear really that there must be a focus at the centre of planning and implementing right care, right person around ensuring patient safety so that individuals in health crisis aren't left without support. And this model was first developed by Humberside Police back in 2020, and it's now in the process of being implemented across police forces in England and Wales, where it's also underpinned by a national partnership agreement between a number of stakeholders, which sets out the threshold for a police response to a mental health related incident. And just in terms of some figures, Humberside Police identified that before the introduction of Right Care, Right Person, their police force was deployed to an average of over 1,500 incidents per month relating to issues such as concerns for welfare, mental health incidents or missing persons. And as a result of implementing this over a 3-year period, Humberside Police saw average incidents per month reduced by 508 deployments, which equated to over 1,100 officer hours and allowed resources to be dedicated elsewhere. So turning to prisons and probation, the overall average daily prison population in Northern Ireland was over 1,600 in 22-23, which represents an increase of 13% compared to 21-22. And remand receptions also increased by 17% during 22-23, which is up from just over 2,700 to over 3,100 during 22-23. So the research really highlights concerns around access to rehabilitation and support services for remand prisoners, as this is often limited. The Northern Ireland Prison Service has little scope to work with remand prisoners, as often these individuals haven't actually been convicted of any offence, and then this is a particular issue for those later convicted and released due to time served, as they typically cannot access rehabilitation support. And the use of short custodial sentences is generally also recognised in the research as being ineffective, and barriers to accessing health and social care services on completion of a short sentence can hinder a person's rehabilitation and resettlement into the community. So the need for greater collaborative working to help ensure that mental health needs are dealt with in a multidisciplinary way prior to an individual's release from prison are highlighted in various reports as key to addressing issues in this area. And also worth just considering the needs of certain groups within the criminal justice system, such as women and girls. Criminal Justice Inspection published a report in 2021 with a focus on how females in conflict with the law are treated, and women and girls are more likely to receive short prison sentences, but their impact can obviously be far-reaching, particularly for mothers and their children. So this report reiterated the need for a new small custodial facility for women, which be built, staffed and run around a therapeutic model and supported by an acute mental health facility. And the prison review team originally made this recommendation in 2011. So a number of groups working to support victims of crime have also highlighted the detrimental impact that delay in the criminal justice system has on their mental health. Some slides here highlighting figures published by the Department of Justice in August 24 around case processing times for criminal cases between April 2023 and March 2024. So the average time taken for a case to be dealt with at all courts was 190 days, a decrease of 8% from the previous year. But the figures broken down by offence category highlight that the median time taken for cases where the main offence was sexual was 675 days. So that's the longest of any of the offence categories, but was also a decrease of 11% from the figures for 22-23. So Sir John Gillen's review into serious sexual offences published in 2019 highlighted the serious impact that delay within the system can have for complainants and defendants in this type of case. He also included a specific chapter around cross-examination on previous sexual history, which referred to a perception amongst complainants that cross-examination on previous sexual history will frequently occur and present yet another daunting hurdle. And there was a recommendation for the department to carry out an exercise to determine the extent of admission of previous sexual experience in trials here. So linked to this, the Commissioner Designate for Victims of Crime had highlighted that the potential disclosure of third-party evidence can have a traumatic impact on the mental health of victims of sexual crime, with the suggestion that individuals can sometimes feel forced to choose between justice and healthcare when deciding whether to attend counselling alongside going through the criminal justice system. So May 24 marked 5 years since the publication of the Gillen Review, and there were 135 out of the 253 recommendations implemented at that time, but there were some real particular achievements which have assisted victims, such as remote evidence centres and also the introduction of independent legal advisors as well. So this slide just provides a bit of a brief overview of some of the issues relating to the mental health and wellbeing of staff working within the criminal justice system. In the Chief Constable's 22-23 accountability report to the Northern Ireland Policing Board highlighted that at least 1 in 5 people working in policing are experiencing a mental health condition. and concerns around the impact of workplace pressures on officers has been highlighted by the Police Federation on a number of occasions. So the statistics on this slide also show the average working days lost across prison grade staff for 2022-23, and this shows that over a third were due to anxiety, stress, depression or other psychiatric illnesses. There are also innovations such as a new staff wellbeing hub opened at McGabbery in 2022, really in an effort to help provide additional support after critical incidents as well. And the paper also reflects a number of other professionals working within the system as well, in a bit more detail too. So I've already talked a bit about right care, right person in terms of some of the work being done within PSNI, but it's also worth taking a look at some other useful problem-solving justice initiatives. Locally, we have a substance misuse court in operation at Laganside Court, managed by the presiding magistrate. However, it does seem like budgetary pressures have had an impact in this area, as plans for a mental health court don't seem to have been progressed to date. Trauma-informed approaches are also worth potential consideration by the committee. The Scottish Government published a trauma-informed framework for working with victims and witnesses in the justice system in 2023. The Scottish Parliament also introduced a Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill in 2023, which aims to embed a trauma-informed approach across the justice system by requiring all justice agencies to take steps to reduce re-traumatisation. And the Welsh Government has also undertaken similar work. So it might be useful to consider this approach to trauma-informed practice further in the Northern Ireland context, with a report from the Safeguarding Board and Queen's University in February 2024 recommending that a Northern Ireland trauma-informed strategy, resource hub and training framework should be established. There's also some other work ongoing in England and Wales, where legislation was introduced in 2023 which provides that offenders can only be released from prison on working days that are not followed by a weekend or bank holiday. The idea behind this was aimed at mitigating the risk of vulnerable prison leavers who might have a mental health or drug issue from being released on a Friday and then not having enough time to access vital services like healthcare and accommodation before services close at weekends. And elsewhere, the Prison Inreach and Court Liaison Service was established in 2006 at Cloverhill Prison in the Republic of Ireland, and it's a multidisciplinary psychiatric service that assists courts in identifying defendants with major mental illness and provides practical solutions to assessing what the appropriate mental health care would be for each defendant. So depending on the seriousness of the offence and the severity of the mental illness, prisoners could be diverted to a secure forensic hospital or a community mental health hospital as well. So largely brings me to the end of the presentation, but just to sum up, I suppose, in terms of kind of 4 key takeaways. Firstly, many of the individuals in contact with the criminal justice system are repeat offenders who experience mental ill health, and obviously this presents significant challenges for the justice system, including policing and prisons. Police officers are also responding to an increasing number of mental health related incidents, and plans to roll out the right care, right person model aim to direct people with mental health related issues to the most appropriate service. Thirdly, Northern Ireland's prisons have a high number of people with mental ill health, and access to rehabilitation and support services can at times be limited for prisoners who are on remand. Barriers to accessing mental health services on completion of a sentence can also hinder a person's rehabilitation and resettlement into the community. And fourthly, there's a need for interconnection between health and justice across these areas, with a need for joint funding to address issues around mental health provision. And some of the innovations I touched on in the last slide show the potential available through embedding trauma-informed approaches when dealing with individuals in contact with the justice system. So that's a very broad overview covering quite a few areas, but obviously if there's anything in particular the committee would like me to go away and look at, very happy to do that and provide some more detail, and yeah, we'll try and answer any of your questions now as well.
Thanks very much, Annabelle. It was a great paper, and I want to commend you for it. Your last point about collaboration between health and justice is exactly why we're looking at this issue, particularly around the right person, right care, where we do have concerns that people end up incarcerated and it's maybe not the best place for them. and then the support issues too. I'm going to open the floor to members and have a few questions myself at the end. Morris.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. It highlights an awful lot of issues that need to be resolved. And Ciara and I were in a previous meeting this morning when we heard that the mental health issues in Northern Ireland are higher than anywhere else within the UK and Ireland. So it touches a lot of bases from what we heard earlier on today. But the point that really concerns me is the amount of time that our PSNI officers spend in A&Es across the country, the length of time it ties them down until the person that they are looking after, either a prisoner or someone with a mental health issue, is triaged and processed. And then what happens when that happens? They're either let out without care or without guidance or without being pointed to the right place, or they're put into the ward or arrested and taken to the station. So there's a long delay and a long number of hours is used up, plus the mental stress and the strain that puts on the individual officer, i.e. they're not performing their duty. They're being nursemaid in an A&E situation that they're not normally used to. And the Chair alluded to it. I would like to see more work and more discussions ongoing between the health and justice to try and alleviate the length of time that officers spend not doing their job in A&Es, doing the job of a mental health person, which normally they're not qualified to do. They've got some qualifications, don't get me wrong, but that's not their field of expertise. And also, as I've alluded to, you talked about the mental health within the justice system itself. This type of activity has a massive bearing on the individual officer, never mind any other department as it moves along. And I think that's something that both the Health Department and the Justice Department need to sit down and formulate some sort of policy whereby it takes the weight off the officer and provides the proper care that people need when they go into a hospital suffering from mental health related incident or illness. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Morris.
Well, certainly, obviously, the right care, right person model is it's a really interesting one to have a look at, and certainly I think the PSNI is obviously engaging with the Department of Health and other stakeholders in the process of looking at that, and it'll be important as well that as part of that there's a clear and shared understanding of when it is appropriate for a police officer to deploy to a particular incident and when it's not. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting model that's worth further exploration by the committee.
And just to follow on, I think on Judith's point as well, in the paper we do have some figures that relates to the number of hours that the PSNI are spending in hospitals. Now that's for the period 1st of January 2023 to the 14th of April 2023. We can look into a little bit more about if we can get any more data around that. It currently stands for that quarter, you say, of the year at 4,550. We'll work to put that into a bit more context to see what that actually means. That would be helpful.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Morris. Ciara?
Thank you, Annabelle and Judith. Quite detailed report, and it's really great to see all our innovative practices that are being utilised to tackle and that have been in operation for 20 plus years in other areas. I suppose what's interesting for me, and I think it's no surprise to all of us, regarding the level of repeat offending and likewise the lack of rehabilitation. I suppose that's two things, but also I would be interested in maybe to get a drill down of the actually cohort of people. We've heard here today that there will be key inequalities or key groups of individuals, and it'd be useful to drill down to get an impact, with regards to males, females, with regards to children in care, it would be useful for that piece of information too. So to really put a picture of the individual behind the stats, I think it's really, really good, because I think particularly myself and many of the cases I'm dealing with is young vulnerable men who have mental health conditions, who are diagnosed, who are heavily medicated, who are ending up in the justice system with families who are crying out for support. So that's a big issue, and I find that it's increasing in relation to cases that I'm dealing with. So I'd be really, really interested, because I think we need to really get behind the individuals and maybe a few case studies as well would be brilliant.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a look. What I will just to note up front is that there is real issues with the data in this area. So, we'll see what figures are out there and the robustness and reliability of it as well. It is something that, that is a problem across the board, across, prisons, police and probation as well. But there'll definitely be something we can look into.
It's just one other area, because I'm very key. Administrative data and data linkages is critically important, and I know I've raised this with the Department of Finance just recently, because in speaking to a lot, there seems to be huge issues. It'd be interesting just to, what's the ideal data that you would like to have that may be available that you can't access? I think we need to really unpack that as well, because the more informed we are, the better the research, and can tell us a lot more of what we need to do. So there's something, I think, that not just for the justice system, but for across government departments, how can we improve research through better administrative data being available? So if you have anything on that, would be useful to find out too. Thank you.
Ciara, Doug?
Thank you,
Sorry,
Chair.
apologies, Doug. Apologies. Stuart was in before you.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll come to you. I'm sorry. Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes, the Justice Committee has had previous interaction with the problem-solving courts, which have proven to be very successful, particularly on substance abuse, and I think we need to move that on into the whole area of mental capacity. A lot of the skill set that's used by judges in respect of the substance abuse can also be their transferable skills into this area, particularly around the right person, right care, arguably the right court in the right place as well. I think when we come to inquire further into all of this, we need to be looking at, and these are things more for the Department of Health rather than the Department of Justice, having sat in an A&E and watched police officers struggle with patients who are very, very challenged and very difficult. Quite often they're just very loud. Quite often they will make unusual moves. I've seen them both handcuffed and also there on a sort of a voluntary basis in preparation perhaps for further action. So we need to be working and challenging with the Department of Health into those circumstances. The necessity for police officers to be there. It may be that it's not always necessary for them to be there, but rather the Department of Health should perhaps provide an element of, I'm going to use the word security, but certainly care for patients rather than police officers, and that might reduce some of the time. Also, it would be helpful if it were possible to find quiet spaces for those people coming into A&Es. And I think also the point that Ciara is making in relation to a lot of young men, that also spills over into housing as well and into antisocial behaviour, what's perceived to be antisocial behaviour, much of it brought about by mental health issues. Thank you.
Elise, do you want to comment, or are you happy enough that you've got other areas to look into?
I think we'll definitely have a look more at the right care, right approach. That was definitely about getting people into, the right health professionals, accessing, the right people, getting into access to the right people. I think what we'll do is, what would be really beneficial is to see, maybe chat to Humberside Police about how that worked in practice, maybe get a case study together with a bit more of the details. That would be useful, Stuart.
Yeah, good. I've got a couple of questions for you around Humberside Police too. Right, Doug,
Thanks, Chair. Annabelle, Judith, excellent report. Thank you very much indeed. Looking at the workforce within the criminal justice system, I'm struck by two figures which you've got here. 1 in 5 police officers reporting experience mental ill health. What would be really interesting to know, if you can please, is of that 1 in 5, is it all of them work related, or is that other issues that's affecting them, which is creating that mental health, or is it all work related? And that would be the same for those from the prison staff. 36% of their sick days off are due to anxiety and stress and depression. And it'd be really interesting to know if that's all due to work pressures or not, or if that's some external pressures in regards to that. So that would be useful if we could find out what that is. And it leads me on, Chair, to something else. I mean, I'd really like to look at, because when we look at the prison service and we look at 36% of sick days is due to anxiety and depression and mental health issues. But if we look at the Northern Ireland Civil Service Human Resource Staff Handbook, it doesn't allow for excusal of sick for anything to do with psychological or mental health issues. It only allows for injury, disease and assault. So somebody can go and say, I'm off with stress and anxiety and depression due to my workload, and then ask for an excusal of sick, and they won't even look at it because it doesn't allow it to look at it. And I don't know if there's any way we can look at and engage with the Department for Justice so that they can engage with the Finance Minister to see if we can amend that to include that. I've certainly had one female prison officer who was on sick due to threats of sexual violence. And she was not allowed excusal of sick because it wasn't deemed as being injuries, disease or assault.
That's very important. And actually, I mean, it's like we had a mind meld, because I absolutely concur with you on that, and I had questions around it myself, because we all know it's not. It was my question was around the police officers, the 1 in 5. Did that include staff? Because we all know that, particularly those in public protection branch, but anybody involved in front line to that extent are seeing horrendous things that probably will never leave them, and those things are bound to have a psychological impact. Likewise in the prison service, I mean, we've been to visit Hyde Bank, we've seen, well, we didn't see, we heard people in severe crisis, and we also are, I mean, public statistics were published this week indicating that the DOJ is the highest level of sickness of all departments. So I think that there are issues around protection for those people, and the police kind of moving them about inside doesn't necessarily cut it. It's about what occupational health is available, and we know that there are difficulties and delays in there. So Doug, absolutely, that's great.
Certainly look at that staff handbook, because I mean, I'm reading it here and I won't mention the person, but where they literally said work-related stress is not a physical assault, so you're not looked at for any form of excusal for sick.
No, astonishing.
And that's not acceptable.
No, you're absolutely right, and it should be looked at, particularly for jobs like this, I think, where,
yeah,
for example,
exactly.
if you're working in public protection and you are, and I've had cases with officers and staff who day in and day out are having to detail, see at first hand or type details of rapes, murders, child sexual exploitation and abuse, all of those things. I'm not clear how the civil service would expect that would not have a psychological impact on anybody. So a very valid point, well made, Doug, and thank you very much for that contribution. I've got Justin and then I'll come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, Judith. A serious piece of work, very methodical, very detailed, very professional. Where were the golly gosh moments for you in terms of the research and observations that you saw, and what is the mechanism by which that will then be brought to light for the Department for Justice? Are there any pieces of information in here which you think, does the Justice Minister know about this, and what is the mechanism by which that would be fed back? Is it via this committee, or how does that happen? Who sees this research which you've undertaken, which is crucially important research?
So this is there's loads of detail we can go into, and this is just a really broad kind of overview of what's happening in the sector. I think the golly gosh moments will be whenever you get into those details, and this is light touch. There's so much you can go into it, and there's so many avenues you could go into, like further exploration. Judith, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously just quite a broad overview that we've taken in relation to it. There's lots of different avenues to potentially go down. I mean, some of the figures in it are, quite shocking.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah, it's definitely definitely there's a lot in it that could be explored further for sure.
In terms of, obviously, this paper was, prepared to brief yourselves here in the committee, and it'll be available on the Assembly website. And then I know that there's lots of research and stuff ongoing, and obviously the Department of Justice, which we've included in this. So we will. As I say, it's a very broad overview.
Okay, in terms of the prisons having a high number of people with mental ill health on remand, receptions increased by 70%, 2022, 2023 to 2020, from 2021 to 2022. To what do you attribute that 17% spike? And to what extent are those people in remand suffering ill mental health as a consequence of being in remand and not being sentenced or convicted? After the conviction, after not being without sentence. To what extent do you attribute ill health in that scenario?
Can you just repeat that? Just sorry.
So that spike. To what do you attribute the 17% spike from year on year? Okay, why did that happen? And to what extent is ill mental health being experienced as a consequence of being in remand without being sentenced?
Yeah, I don't think we'd be able to extrapolate like what that here today. What we can definitely do is go away and have a look at it further about what the motivating kind of factors are behind that spike. Something we can look into, if that would be helpful.
Okay, and the last thing is complainants in cases involving sexual crime feel forced to choose between healthcare and justice. Please just digress a little bit on that.
Well, that was mainly from a report by the Commissioner Designate for Victims of Crime. So the Commissioner had published a report last year in relation to that, which had surveyed a number of victims, and one of the sort of key findings from that was that individuals who are going through the court process feel that they are maybe having to choose between accessing counselling or going through the criminal justice process because they're concerned about disclosure of those records potentially throughout as part of a case.
Is that not, that's a startlingly scary reality, surely?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was why when we were making this paper, we wanted to make sure that we included that information around the impact on victims, because I think quite often you focus on people in the system, but there's obviously a lot of impact as well on victims themselves.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Justin. The clerk was just saying to me there while you asked your question, if you like, and if the committee agreed, we could send the research paper to the department or to the ministerial office, and for their information. It might be helpful for them to have it. Are members happy enough with that? Yeah. Kira, you wanted in?
It's just maybe one further follow-up. It's in relation to page 21, and you did mention obviously the ongoing work the PSNI have been trying to do to get the right person to the right care was the multi-agency triage team that was piloted back in 2018, but it seems to continue to be running through the southern or the South-Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. And I know obviously they have issues regarding additional staff capacity, but I would really love if it's operating this past 6 years, because we do know it is going to be a multi-agency team, and we've noted that regarding the PSNI cannot be left to be picking up the pieces at the tail end, and we need that multi-agency team at the early intervention stage. So if there's some way we could maybe write to the PSNI or the Trust to try and even get a presentation on it or some further update information of the lessons learned, the implications, the impact, and maybe going forward what they would be the ideal picture, the ideal multi-agency team.
I imagine the police would be happy enough to do that, because I recall at one stage during my time on the board there has been ongoing issues over funding there, and at one stage the department was looking at pulling out and what was going to be left of the police. But it has proven extremely useful for to divert people and keep people out of the system and provide them with the help they need. So yeah, I'm sure we can. Members agreed that we would get further information on that. Right, thank you. Just a couple of questions that I have, and it's stuff that kind of has mostly been mentioned. Page 28 of your report refers to barriers to people getting help, and you mentioned it a couple of times in the course of your presentation, Judith. It's about barriers to accessing mental health services on completion of sentence. And I wondered if maybe you could give us a couple of examples of that and how that would happen. What are those barriers?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's probably the main issue is when individuals are going to leave prison, ensuring that in advance of that, whether it might be access to support around healthcare, employment opportunities, housing, things like that, ensuring that individuals have avenues which will ensure that they have support once they are leaving that environment. So I think that it really kind of comes back to that, just ensuring that there is that multidisciplinary kind of approach to ensuring that there are support services available for
Essentially, it's the preparation in advance. So whenever somebody gets out, from your research, did you pick up what the barriers may be? Is it that they are being sent to places that are not their hometown, where they don't have family support? What are the barriers to actually accessing the services? Is it that they're registered with a GP elsewhere? What are the barriers?
Yeah, we can look into it a little bit more. Definitely. I think just in this, as I say, quite broad overview, housing was a big thing, because you need that address to be able to then go and be registered with your GP. I think one of the approaches that we discussed as well was that not releasing people at the weekend, because often then they come out and then there's absolutely no, like, your GP's not open at the weekend. So they get released on a Friday quite often, and then they're unable to access that care immediately. They're left for the weekend, and so that's a short-term thing. But yeah, we can definitely look into it.
You've kind of taken me on to a couple of my other points, which is about the weekend. Page 62 of your report, and again you spoke about it, Judith, is about whenever the police refer on. This is the police who have the right person, right care operational model in place already, and whenever they refer on to other agencies. And I wanted to check with you, in those circumstances, now let me find where I've written my question down. Whenever the police have decided that they're going to refer on because of right person, right care, have the services been available? And are the services in those places where it exists, are they available on evenings and weekends? Because it seems to me that part of the issue here is that there's an expectation that mental health crisis will happen 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Which leaves people in a very difficult position whenever they're at their lowest ebb and the crisis. They're in the downward spiral and there's nowhere to go and nowhere to access help. And it often means then that people and juveniles, as we've read in reports, are kept in custody because it's the safest place. And custody really shouldn't be the place for people in mental health crisis. So what goes on in those other places whenever the police decide to refer on? Do you know? Or is that something you need to look into?
Probably something I'd need to have a wee look into and come back to you again about that, if that's all right.
I think it would be important to know what services are available in the other places and when. Around the disclosure issue, and this may not be for you to answer, but it may be something that we need to find out from the Victims Commissioner or the Judiciary. Whenever people are choosing between, what I'm presuming here is that people are having to weigh up whether they want to go to counselling because the notes from the counselling are potentially disclosed in a trial, and there may be things that people don't want disclosed. My understanding is that the only person who sees everything is the judge, and the judge decides what will be disclosed. And even then, it is only what is relevant. And I think that it would be highly important for people in that situation to understand that that's how the process works. And I would like, I suppose, assurances or some information around whether or not people who are in that position who feel that they have to make that choice, whether they are informed and advised, not just that, oh, this could be disclosed, but how it would be disclosed and why, and that the only person who would have access to the entirety of their notes is going to be the judge, because that may well make a difference for people, and it could purely boil down to education on the system. But again, that may not be for you to answer. Let me just check if I've anything else. I've raised that issue about right person, right care, and you're going to look into that for us. I was really interested in your examples around, in your paper you'd put in about the Republic of Ireland has mental health courts. I'd be interested to know some more detail around that, how it works, who's referred there, what happens, pre, during and post, a mental health court approach. And the other thing I was wondering about from the committee's perspective, I appreciate that we've got a bill imminent, but if we were to proceed down this issue, I'm aware that EPOC, that's the kind of tackling paramilitarism programme and dealing with organised crime, they do a lot of work around trauma-informed practice, and we're seeing it more and more. And I wondered if the committee might be interested in having a briefing from those people around, from the trauma-informed practice people, because I think it would tie into our work with EPOC, but also on issues like this, to understand how that might work in the justice system. And I was at the Restorative Justice Council had a conference last Friday, and I was at that, and I attended the fringe seminar for the prisons and about restorative practice in prisons, and there was a lot of information there about trauma-informed practice. So I think it could be useful for the committee maybe to see, I suppose, the extent to which that's happening in our justice system at present, areas that are being looked into, and just how that works in practice. Would members be interested in that if we had time to build it into the programme? Yes? Okay, thank you. I don't think, so basically, what has happened is you've come and given us a great presentation, and now we've sent you away for even more things. But I suppose the other thing I would like you to look into, if you would, is it would be helpful for us to have some understanding about, we know that there are considerable levels of substance abuse within prisoners. We also know that there are issues around special educational needs, prisoners who have not been statemented, but also speech and language therapy and those kinds of things. It would be helpful to have some statistics and breakdown around numbers of prisoners with, special educational needs, numbers of prisoners who have not been statemented, but the service would anticipate that, that can see that there are problems there. The numbers of prisoners who have communication difficulties because of SLT requirements and so on. The numbers with substance addiction, whether, all of that type of thing, so that we can get an idea of the picture of what is happening with people who are going through the system. We know what the key reasons are, and even to know, you've cited homelessness, how many are homeless? And that's why, one of the issues for me was about Inverary House, and we've mentioned that, and it's on our forward work programme potentially. But my visit there, people who'd been through the whole experience, who are coming out with nowhere to go, no access, they're saying it's like we're being set up to fail. Because even if they do have a house, it's empty, a flat, it's empty. It takes 10 days to get emergency money to buy furniture. All of these practical things that can just leave people over a weekend thinking, I'm stuck here in this dank, furnitureless flat with nothing, nobody. And so the quick release is to go and buy drugs from the people that they know are able to supply them. So that would be helpful, and thank you very much. I think that was all I had. Ciara?
Just one other area, and I don't want to throw more work on you, but I wonder internationally, is there any research? We're well aware of the high levels of mental health across the north, and that's reflected then in high levels of mental health for young offenders and those currently on remand. But I'm conscious too, we need to look at the system, and I'd be interested, is there any research with regard offenders within prisons and the negative impact that may have or not have on mental health? Is there improvement through rehabilitation, or is it got worse through rules and regulations within the prison system or breaches of them? I don't know, I've never came across any, but I'd be interested, is there any work being done on it? Because we need to look, if we're looking at mental health across the board, we need to look pre-offence, offence, whilst in prison and then coming out, and we've got high level of repeat offending as well. So I think we need to have a seamless approach to any research that we're doing. So if there was any, it would be interesting to even get it referenced so we could read up on it.
It reminded me of something else, Ciara, which actually is the Friday thing. So it's in your report about the Friday release, and I appreciate that there are other jurisdictions that have that's in legislation through regulation. I'm fairly certain when we received evidence from the prison service, at one point they indicated that as a practice they now try not to release on a Friday, and bank holidays and so on, but that's more that they're doing that from goodwill. I suppose could we check that? Because the other side of it is it's not just about Fridays. Sometimes if somebody's released and then the prison doesn't get them to the housing executive on time, they should be released, but the housing executive doesn't have time to sort them out. So it would be interesting to have some. I mean, I've tabled an assembly question anyway about the number of people released from prison who don't have accommodation lined up. But I think it would be helpful for us to have some understanding of that process, because the prison service is doing it from goodwill rather than obligation, I think. Recognising that it's not a good thing to do. Once again, ladies, could I thank you very much. I think that the extent to which we have overrun is indicative of our interest in this subject, and now we've given you a few more burrows to go down, so thank you very much indeed.
Just seek formal agreement, Commissioner. This wasn't agreed to about the staff handbook.
Yep.
I agree to
Just so that we've got our formalities, I think we're all in concurrence anyway, but just to make sure we've got it formally on the record, can I seek your agreement that we do commission a further research paper covering the areas that we've listed there, around mental health, court saying stats, etc. Are members content? Yes.
Agreed.
And the other thing is then around Doug's letter, read the staff handbook. Are we content that should proceed? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Right. So, now that I've found where I am. Agenda item 5 then is oral evidence from the Youth Justice Agency, mental health issues and youth justice, and an update on progress against the business plan. I'm going to ask members to turn to pages 72 to 252 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers. These papers also include a report from the Northern Ireland Executive's programme on paramilitarism and organised crime, which is EPOC, to which I've referred earlier, on the connection between paramilitarism and mental health, and a report by Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland on youth interventions. Could I ask you to note those items? The Youth Justice Agency is in attendance at the meeting today, and they're going to provide us with an update on the mental health issues within youth justice and an update of progress against business plan, as I've indicated. And I would like to welcome to the meeting Stephen Martin, the Chief Executive of the Youth Justice Agency. Stephen, the last time you were with us, you didn't get to do very much of the talking, but you will today. We also have Mary Auchey, the Director of the Woodlands Juvenile Justice Centre, and Colleen Heaney, the Director of Youth Justice Services. Can I thank you very much for being with us and taking the time? I apologise that we've run slightly over with our previous item, but that's fairly standard with the Justice Committee. We're all fairly engaged in the issues, and you will also be afforded similar courtesy of us being engaged with the issues that you're bringing to us. So thank you very much, and I apologise that we're running late. I'll invite you to give your presentation, and doubtless there'll be some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'll try and adapt what I was planning to say in response to what you've just heard, because we've done a lot in trauma-informed practice and are seen as a bit of an exemplar in Northern Ireland, so we can share some of that and some of the material on crisis as well. So thanks very much for this opportunity. We have done a lot in this space with no resources, so we're really delighted to share what we've done. And I'll start by focusing on our mental health issues before we go on to talk about our business plan. Brevity is not my strong suit, but I'll try and be brief.
Ours either, it's fine.
In our experience, children involved in offending behaviour often have experienced adverse childhood experiences and trauma and do face issues with their mental health. And these mental health issues can contribute to offending behaviour, so finding ways to address them is really important to help improve a child's life chances and reduce the likelihood and impact of further offending. The health and social care system, as you've just discussed, has statutory responsibility for the provision of mental health services to children. However, we were finding in our experience that mainstream child and adolescent mental health services in the community weren't meeting the needs of many of the vulnerable children we work with. Many children were failing to engage and being discharged for missing appointments. So around 5 years ago, we started working with the Southern Trust to pilot a different model where we co-fund a mental health practitioner who is embedded in the Youth Justice Agency. With the support of our staff, this practitioner brings the service to children and tailors it to meet their needs. The results of our pilot were incredible. In the year before the pilot, only 14% of children we referred to CAMHS completed a programme with improvements in their mental health. This jumped to 88% in the first year of the pilot. Given the success, we've moved with other trusts to roll out the model. And on the crisis point, in the 6 months before that pilot, 12 of our children had to be seen by the CAMHS crisis team. In the 6 months after the pilot, it was no children. So it had a really, really significant impact. YGA CAMHS is funded on a 50-50 basis, but neither Trust nor YGA have budget for this. So far, I've been able to find our share through savings generated as a result of the difficulties we faced in filling posts in the organisation in a timely way, but I'm obviously really keen to find a more sustainable funding solution. The position is slightly different in the Woodlands Juvenile Justice Centre, of which Mary's the director, where we have statutory responsibility to ensure healthcare, including mental health care, is provided. This is delivered through ACORN, which is a multidisciplinary mental health and therapeutic care service. All children admitted to Woodlands are offered an ACORN assessment, and this is used to inform a tailored package of support when a child is in Woodlands. Where needed, referrals are made for prompt follow-up with Step 3 CAMHS when a child returns to the community, and I know that was a particular point in relation to adults, but we have seen a child is not released if they need ongoing mental health support. So far they've been getting it. Importantly for us, we also have access to the Forensic Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service for Northern Ireland for young people presenting with complex needs and significant public safety issues. While there are only a small number of children who meet this threshold, we really value this service, and it is important to us that it remains available. We have prepared some case studies in our pack, but it might be quite difficult to share them in the oral sessions, but we're very happy to send those to the committee afterwards. I'll move on very briefly to our business plan. Most of the plan remains on track to be achieved, and this is because of the skill, professionalism and dedication of our staff. I'm very blessed by having an absolutely brilliant staff team, and I'm pleased that this was recognised by Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland in the Youth Interventions report they published last week. In that report, CJINI also recognised our contribution over several years to significantly reducing the number of children who enter the formal justice system. This is a major achievement which our current business plan aims to build on. But to do that, we need a stable workforce, and with significant differentials between the pay of our professionally qualified staff and their counterparts in other public sector bodies, this is proving really difficult to achieve. And there are risks there already that are having an impact on the delivery of some of our business plan targets, in which we don't have all of the tools to manage ourselves. And we're looking for the support of colleagues in the department and across the NICS to help us address the risk. But despite these workforce challenges, we continue to be an innovative organisation, seeking to improve what we do for the benefit of children, their families, victims and communities. Our model of practice sets out the child first principles under which we operate and provides the framework for our programme of continuous improvement. I'd like to just finish off by picking up two strands of the work, and the first is relating directly to what you just heard around trauma-informed practice. We have made a commitment to become a more trauma-informed organisation, and this is important because, as you've heard, many individuals we work with have experienced trauma, including some of our staff, of course, which impacts on their lives and often contributes, in the case of our service users, to offending behaviour. Working in a trauma-informed way means increasing our understanding of trauma and its impact, and designing our services and ways of working accordingly. We're well along the journey, and we have been seen in the case study that your research colleagues mentioned, we are seen as an exemplar of practice. We're one of the case study examples, and we've worked with Trauma Informed Oregon, one of the world leaders in this, to do just complete a self-assessment. And we're very happy to share more about this, and Colleen has been leading our whole work on this and has done an absolutely fantastic job. It also translates actually into our wellbeing programs for staff and our wellbeing support. So it's not trauma-informed practice isn't just how we work with victims and service users and families, it's how we work with each other and how we support each other. The second area I'd just like to highlight is participation. This is an important theme which runs right through most aspects of our work. Through our participation champions, we've made real strides in involving children and families who use our services in helping improve how we do our work and maximising the impact. Our participation programme has been recognised as good practice by UNICEF and by the Children's Commissioner, and we would welcome the opportunity to talk more about it. And I'll finish with feedback from we do very, very regular surveys of all of our service users, and I'll finish with feedback from a child who told us in response to that about our services in their own words, so it's not grammatically correct, but I hope you bear with me. So I learnt more about my emotions and taking into consideration another person's point of view. I built my confidence and self-esteem, feel I was able to talk with my youth justice worker, and then became more confident in being able to talk to my family about my feelings. I know why I was offending and how to avoid repeating this behaviour. I am earning trust with my family, and I'm more aware of the effects of the consequences on me and my future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. Open the floor to members. Doug?
Stephen, thank you for your report, and I'm just looking at your business performance plan here, and I'm looking at it, it's very good actually, but where it seems to come up amber all the time is all to do with staff.
Yes.
And staff vacancies. Can you give us an idea of that staff vacancies? What are those staff vacancies, and are they specific roles that you're missing, and what your plans are to try and fix them?
Yes, so about half of our staff are professionally qualified in either social work or youth work. We have 15% fewer staff in those areas now than we had when I took up post 3.5 years ago. There's two main reasons for that. One is Northern Ireland hasn't been training enough social workers for the last 12 years. And two is we have the worst paid staff with those professional qualifications in the public sector. Our staff, and I'm not speaking from a position of self-interest because I'm an administrative civil servant, but my staff are paid significantly less because our pay deals over the last number of years have been at or below inflation. In other public sector bodies, they've been at or above inflation. So simply demand and supply. Mary was telling me about one of our staff, senior staff in Woodlands. He got a phone call from a trust offering her a job without an interview with a £12,000 pay rise. I mean, how can I compete with that? So I have a very loyal group of staff, but cost of living is cost of living, and we've just lost far too many. I think we've lost 18 over the last, to other employers over the last 3 years, and I think another 6 or 7 to retirement. Out of a professional body of staff of 100, we've 200 in total. 100 of those are professionally qualified.
And I guess that's the probation board have exactly the same issue as well. I think that the whole pay differential between social workers in your sector and in the NHS is a huge issue.
Probation or social workers are paid more than mine.
Yeah, but yes, there is. I mean, there's a competition there, and sometimes competition is healthy. But when you haven't got enough, you're just stripping out one to give to another now. And at the minute, health seems to be paying more, and that's where they're going.
So what we're trying to do is we have made a case for a retention and recruitment allowance within the NICS pay structures. But it's sitting within our department. We can't get it out to get it to HR at the moment, but we're hopeful eventually it will, and that may help. It will help.
And is DOJ pushing that case for you? Are they?
Not at the moment, no.
They're not?
No.
Why?
I don't know. I'm obviously fighting very hard internally to get it pushed, but so far with limited success.
Want us to correspond with the department on that?
I think so. I mean, you know, we're here to scrutinise and add support, I think, as well, and I think that's adding support, because it is a real issue, and we've heard this before. Sure, we've had this from the probation board, where they're in competition to keep social workers, certainly from the Department for Health, but if it's even worse where you are, and if I look at the indicators, and most of the indicators are because of staff shortages, we're not heading where we should be. I think so.
Members agreed with that?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Doug, is that you finished? Or have you
Yes,
more?
it is. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Ciara?
Just first, I have to commend you once again. I know you were here before, and I'm just taken aback by not only the success that you have had, it's just the innovation of innovative practice, and putting the child first in that wraparound team. And as you say, and particularly just those figures that you mentioned, just by going on ahead without having the funding and bringing in a mental health practitioner, and the transformation that just that decision could make to the lives of young people. And I know we're obviously very much focused on mental health, but I'm conscious a child's needs are just not broken down to mental health. There's usually a range of needs, whether that's within the family, as you say, the trauma that they may experience leading up to, etc., etc. And one of the areas that you did mention you see a high increase in is regards to moderate and severe learning difficulties. So I'm interested just to kind of find out what's been done in that area through youth justice, and are there any barriers to access and support from an educational point of view, alongside obviously and what you are currently doing through mental health and innovative practice there?
Yeah, so I'll bring Colleen and Mary in a moment on that, but actually we're just in the process of developing our new 3-year corporate plan, and one of the issues we've decided we are going to focus on is children with neurodiversity, because it's an area that we recognise that we're doing well, but there's more that we can do. So I'll maybe bring Colleen in first to talk about what we are currently doing in the community, and then Mary on custody.
So neurodiversity is a key area of development. We're in the process of collecting data to get a kind of clear picture around what the needs are in our population, and to be able to plan adequately around that, around skills development and training. But we also work in partnership with our colleagues in education welfare around appropriate access and support for those kids that are SEN, for example, or have additional needs. So that's an ongoing piece of work. We expect it's an area that's going to grow, because we are seeing an increase of children who are presenting with neurodiverse conditions. We're not quite sure what that's about, so we're still in the learning phase around that, but at this stage it's really the information gathering.
Just on that, actual, we're all well aware, and we're dealing with a huge number that are currently awaiting their diagnostics and their assessments, and that can take years. So it'll be interesting in the work that you're doing, for those that you do come across, asking that question as well through their family members. Are they currently being waiting? It's a key area of research. Yeah,
that's part of our I suppose our conversations. We're collecting data around assessment, who's currently on a waiting list, and where are their parental concerns that maybe haven't gone that far. So we are looking at the whole picture to try and get an understanding of the need.
Woodlands, I think we're extremely lucky, and it's nice to put it on record too, our partnership with the Education Authority. So we have education other than at school within Woodlands, and also our partnership with Acorn, with Health, which is our mental health service. We have an excellent head teacher and group of teachers who really concentrate on those young people who have special educational needs. They chase up their reports from the community, they act on those reports, deliver programmes and assessments to help young people whilst they're with us, to the extent that before their involvement, about 27% of young people who left us went back into education, training or employment. It's now 77%. So that work that is done whilst they're in custody has really contributed to, I guess, preparing young people to go back into the community, having had all their treatment whilst they're in custody.
Have you done a cost-benefit analysis of that work?
No, I don't think we have. I mean, to be completely honest, when I took up post, we hid our light very much under a bushel. We didn't kind of talk a lot about what we did. So we've been trying to put it out there. We now publish a performance impact report every year. We're trying to do evaluations of some of our programmes. So the CAMs I talked about, we're planning an evaluation. We will be publishing an evaluation of our children's diversion forums and some of our diversionary work in November. So we're trying to kind of build that evidence base and share the practice that we're doing much more than we have historically.
Thank you, Ciara. Stuart?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Stephen and your team for the incredible work which you do. Well, this is not probably going to be very popular in the Justice Department, but I'm going to put the trade union hat on and wonder why there haven't been equal pay claims in the public sector around the grading and paying for social workers in this particular area. And I know what the answer is. The answer is the budget. And the answer is the amount of money that the department has to spread, and they can only spread it so far. But that still should not stand in the way of people having the appropriate pay for the work which they do. But what I want to ask team about there is around the area of the very niche specialism of working with young people in these circumstances. And is that, in terms of trained social workers for Northern Ireland to do that, is there a specific bespoke course at the university which deals with some of the very difficult aspects or the very particular aspects that you deal with?
So what we do is we take people who have a degree level qualification in social work or youth work and then develop their practice when they're with us. We've got very good supervision arrangements. And have just completed a whole range of training on trauma-informed supervision. So it's very much about, I suppose, recruiting raw diamonds, and given what we pay, it generally is new graduates. And then we put a lot of emphasis and work over the last few years in our internal learning and development. We've just appointed a senior practitioner who's going to be focused on supporting those early career social workers and youth workers. So it's very much qualification and then in-house training.
Stuart? You're happy enough, yes?
Yes, Chair, I think that's useful, and it is actually important to hear that there is in-service training, and it's clearly been recognised the need to deliver that in-service training to get people to the point where they are making a meaningful contribution to the young people's lives. But that does take us then into the disappointing area that they can take that skill set and use it elsewhere and get better paid for that.
Thank you. Justin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your evidence today, folks. The report determined, in terms of managing children who offend, follow-up review, the report determined that while progress has been made, it's been unable to conclude that the system delivers value for money due to inadequate management systems, with a lack of means to measure and report the impact of its work and insufficient understanding of costs throughout the youth justice system. It really relates a bit to what Ciara said in terms of cost-benefit analysis, and if you're not assessing, you're guessing. What?
Okay, so in response to that report from the Northern Ireland Audit Office, there were three recommendations. One was having a strategy for youth justice, which was published by the Minister in March 22, so that's been addressed. The second was more transparent performance information. So as I mentioned, we from I think the first one was November 21. Every year we've published a performance impact report, which is clearly highlighting OBA type outcomes-based accountability information on what we do, and that addresses that. The third issue around costings, our annual report and accounts are very transparent on what we cost and what we spend. There was some work done by our economists in the department to try and do some benchmarking, but it's a pretty complex exercise, so there probably is more to be done around that area, but certainly the first two around more transparency on outcomes-based accountability information and having a strategy, those have both been fully addressed.
Okay, good. Also, in terms of collaborative working, it said that strategic engagement between the Youth Justice Agency and the police was a gap. Is that not starting?
So no, in the Sejeni report, it says operationally our relationships with the police are excellent, which is absolutely true. We work very closely with youth diversion officers on the ground. The gap that Sejeni identified was really at a strategy level. So with the Public Prosecution Service, for example, Colleen and I meet with our equivalents on a very regular basis and share developments and service developments and strategic developments and so on. We do the same with probation. The gap is essentially that we don't have those similar mechanisms with the police. So in response to that report, my boss, the Director General of Prisons, wrote to John Boucher just to ask for mechanisms to be set up. We've actually got a first meeting with a Chief Superintendent level in the police next week to try and open up, work out how we best do this and address that recommendation. So it's certainly not an operational gap with the police, but there is a gap Sejeni identified in terms of strategic sharing.
Well, is it not the same thing?
No, because operationally, in terms of individual children and individual cases, Sejeni found that we work excellently with the police. It's around planning, policy, strategy. It's at that kind of level where Sejeni have identified a gap, not in terms of how we support individual children and how we work with the police to do that.
But operationally, you're driven by your strategy, so I'm just a bit confused by that.
No, it's more around sharing. So, I mean, what we do with the PPS, for example, in probation, is we meet 3 or 4 times a year and just share what we're doing, iron out, have a forum to iron out problems at a senior level. Sejeni have said, look, you need to have something similar with the police, which we don't have, and that's what we're trying to currently address.
Okay, so there are efforts afoot to
yes, absolutely,
align
yes.
strategically
yes.
between Sejeni
yes.
and the police. Okay, thank you.
Can I just come in the back of that one? Stephen, obviously, recently the police produced a children and young person strategy, and children were involved in the development of that, and there were meetings with children about it, and I was present at them. Has this issue not been raised through those conversations?
That is one of the examples that was used by Sejeni, because while we weren't consulted about that strategy, I became aware of it on the day it was launched, so that was used by Sejeni as an example of, you know, there's a bit of a communication gap at that strategic level. Certainly not I would be more concerned if there was a gap at the operational level than at the strategic, but there is something just to be done there, and that's what we're trying to.
So since that was highlighted by Sejeni, and having looked at that report on the day of its launch, I mean, were you content with its contents, and have things improved since then?
I mean, no major issues. I think it's just sometimes about aligning, and even what the police mean by children and young people, their age ranges goes beyond. We just work with children. So, and one of the things I am hoping to do is I'm intending to write to the children's champion in the PSNI, ACC Bobby Singleton, just to have an annual sort of summit or meeting just between he and I, just to kind of ensure that we're on the same page on some of these issues, but I don't see any major dissonance. It's just we weren't fully aware of the strategy.
And key to that obviously is going to be information from the strategy filtering down to operational tier, and then whatever they're finding in operational tier being fed back up to strategic tier. Yes, Terry, do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, and apologies, I was late for the start, but I did read the note. I had a question really around the over-representation within the system, particularly as you outlined around gender, age, religion, which is a big stark one in terms of young Catholics, and then those within the care system or their care status. And I suppose when you did come in March, it was highlighted around the reoffending rates as well, because they're similar to the adult rates, which I suppose is concerning. It's good on the one hand that you're doing much more earlier intervention that I see in terms of the stat, but obviously mental health, the living arrangements, so there's obviously a synergy with those who are most getting into the system in terms of that over-representation. So it's just to see what work has been done, because I know from I think it was the QUB report, where it was cited that it was historical, operational, but also attitudinal causes that kind of led to some of that. So it's just if you can give an update in terms of that and around that early prevention. Do you know, are there things, if we do know that there are the categories where there's an over-representation, what we can be doing further down the line? And I suppose it's that joint up working then at a strategic level. So if that is there's a breakdown there, is that the same with health and with others? And again, if it is, then what work's being done, particularly with the prevention focus in mind?
Okay. So we commissioned that work from Queen's that you just mentioned.
No, I know, yeah.
And I mean, essentially what it said was that they couldn't determine overrepresentation for most categories because they didn't have enough data. So there's clearly a data gap across the justice system. We're doing what we can to improve that within our own organisation. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, no, but that's come up in other sessions, in fairness.
Yeah,
we know.
I suppose the thing that came up for me very strongly was deprivation linked to vulnerabilities. Once you accounted for deprivation, then I think that the researchers found that religious differentials weren't statistically significant. So deprivation and need, once you accounted for those, religion wasn't statistically significant. And that for me is the clear issue. And deprivation goes far beyond us. I suppose in terms of what we can do to tackle, I think it's preventing children from coming into the system in the first place. And you mentioned reoffending. So on our really early stage programme, so we run a programme with the police called Community Resolution Notices. So the police, that's the very earliest kind of type of disposal. When we work with a child who has received a community resolution notice, only 9% of children who receive one reoffend within a year, so come back into the system. But the further a child is in the system, the higher the rate of reoffending. So a key thing is intervene as early as possible.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that having a really significant impact. But there are children with particular vulnerabilities, so children in the care system, for example, and that needs very much that very joined up approach. We have good relationships with health. I think one of our strengths actually is that unlike other parts of the justice system, we have very strong relationships with health and education that are mostly productive. And so there is joint working together, looking at how we can address some of those who are particularly vulnerable, like children in care. But our main focus is if we can work upstream and prevent children coming into the formal system, then they're less likely to re-entrench, and that will have, while it will benefit all children, it will have a greater positive differential impact on those children who are more commonly seen in the system. So it will have a really positive impact on those equality groups most impacted.
I suppose just because obviously social class isn't categorised as one of the groups, so it's just how you touched on deprivation, how you capture that then outside of what's listed here in terms of gender, age, religion.
Yeah, so it's Queen's. What Queen's used was locality. So they used the areas of deprivation. Okay.
And I was going to, do you use then, if you're trying to look at that by way of prevention, do you do like a heat mapping exercise then that starts to, because we know those areas then, like DFC, neighbourhood renewal areas at risk. So do you use a heat, maybe it's something I'll follow up with you on in terms of...
We don't particularly, but one of the, even before community resolution notices, one of the things we do is we have a schools programme. So we work with schools, and those schools are primarily in areas where we have our highest caseload, and our highest caseload tends to be those areas of highest deprivation. So the schools will come to us, or we will go to the schools with particular issues that we think need to be addressed. So whether that's around 40% of the offences we deal with are violence against the person. So whether it's one-punch programmes, it's substance misuse programmes, it's consequential thinking, we will do work with schools. That tends to be very targeted at those areas of highest deprivation.
Just the reoffend a bit, and I know it might be a bit of a different category, but one of the issues around that is connection to school.
Yes,
so maybe it needs to be wider, in terms of the prevention. If the connection to school is one of the downsides, they don't have a connection, i.e. So, but I'll follow up separately then if there's an official that deals with that. That would be good just to know that even, and then we can make contact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It would be one of us.
Aye, no worries. Thank you.
My turn. I've just got a few things to kind of go through with you, if that's all right. Let me see. Yes. I have an interest in terms of the numbers of, obviously you heard the presentation that we had previously. I'm interested in the numbers of of children who you engage with who have learning difficulties, who have adverse childhood experiences. You know, it would be helpful, I'm not asking you for that information now necessarily, but it would be helpful for us to have some understanding of the cohort that you have, how many of them are impacted by these types of issues that we've discussed previously, the speech and language issues. And I know that you've touched on the special educational needs and the attendance at school, and I was interested in that because you gave us some statistics there, I think it was you, Mary, that were startling. You know, children who were not attending school and yet left your facility with, what was it, 77% of them?
27% not engaging to 77% engaging on leaving.
And I'm kind of wondering about, does this make us return to first principles? Because for a long time, the theory had been to put children who have learning difficulties into mainstream. And I'm kind of wondering now, I have close links with some schools that for moderate and severe learning difficulties, and the children who go to those schools are inordinately happy, you know, achieving great things, good results, and it's a very nurturing environment. And I'm wondering if part of the issue is if children who have learning difficulties are being put into mainstream and they're not able to keep up and they're not able to cope and they just feel out of place. You know, is this an issue that perhaps they would have been better served had they attended a different school setting? I mean, do you think that there's a possibility, and is work being done around that to re-examine?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, that would be beyond our competence to
yes, I understand. But just from what you have seen, you know, because it's a very bizarre thing that children who are not attending school, and 14%, you know, and then that increases dramatically to 77% where they're achieving great results.
In fairness, Chair, I guess our children, when they're in custody and with us, do engage in education because they're a captive audience. We have well over 90 to 100% of children who go to school every day in Woodlands. We also have the advantage of having small size classes. We have the advantage of being able to deliver bespoke education to young people, which maybe others don't have the luxury of on the outside, which means that then they're better prepared to go back out into the world of either education or training or employment.
From your case studies with them and the conversations that you have with them about why they weren't going to school in the first place, because presumably because they're not going to school, then that results in them getting into trouble because they have a lot of spare time in their hands. You know, what were the factors that they were telling you about why they didn't go to school and how school made them feel?
There's a range of issues. Some of it can be mental health.
Yes.
Some of it can be crisis at home, child carers. There's a plethora of issues, but I suppose anecdotally, we would have very few children who don't engage in education where that education is a special school, as you've described. Where a few cases that I'm aware of off the top of my head where we have had a child who's referred in for their offending behaviour and has attended a special school, the response from the school's been completely different, and they've been worked brilliantly in partnership with Youth Justice in terms of how they intervene and support that child. So it's unusual that we see children who are engaged in that type of educational setting being referred into the system. And where they've disengaged, there's a range of issues, some of them being where there's an unmet or undiagnosed need in terms of their education.
And that's why I wonder sometimes, are we kind of missing a trick? And, you know, because of a stigma or pride issue, putting children into mainstream school, and it's maybe not the best place for them, you know, in terms of outcomes. Kira, you wanted to briefly?
Just on that, there is practice in that under the Tackling Paramilitary programme through DE, because I myself in the Greater Chantal area would have run a similar programme, and it's still being run, but it is for that small cohort that are in mainstream that are easily that are going to be suspended or expelled, not attending school, so they are taken out, and there is a specialised programme in the community. It's a small group cohort, but really, really successful. So there's pieces of work done, but it's not, as you say, replicated across other areas and other schools because it's constant pilots. But it's maybe something we could follow up through DE under the Tackling Paramilitary programme, and the pieces of work and really good work that's being done for that small cohort of people who will end up on your system So there's even more early intervention work within the schools that could be done, because the schools know, the preschools, the primary schools, you know, it's of those individuals, and they can be identified and tracked. Only organisations are helpless as to be able to support that individual, and the earlier you can get in and intervene and provide that wraparound support, the better.
And there are issues for first-time parents too, who don't necessarily recognise the signs.
Of course.
And it's up to the professionals who have the experience, you know, the childcare people who see it. And it's a very difficult conversation to have with first-time parents too. So I think we're mindful of all of that. Can I ask, bearing in mind the conversation we've just had with Raise, what percentage of people, and you may not have this on top, and it's fine to send it in if you don't have it, what percentage of people do you have who are essentially in your facilities but who should be in receipt of treatment rather than incarceration?
Yeah, so there are no low or medium secure mental health facilities for children in Northern Ireland. I do have some figures with me, which I just need to find, but I think it's something like 6 or 8. So I think they're small numbers, Chair. I can't lay my hands on the figures. Mary probably has them.
7 and 7 years.
Yes, so 7 and 7 years. So it's 7 and 7 years of children who were with us at a stage who are now in an extra contractual referral in England for low or medium secure mental health facilities, and you know they're in that because we don't have them in Northern Ireland, and they've been referred there. So it's not vast numbers, but when they are with us, it's very complex to manage them in a justice setting. And there was the committee may be aware of this, but Nikki produced a report. I think it was last year, a year before, called A Failed Child, which was about the story of Vicky in the Western Trust, who spent time with us, and it tracks her from birth right through, and all of the missed opportunities to support Vicky. But she spent a considerable period of time with us, and we were never an appropriate facility. So when it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it can have a massive impact on both the child, their family, and us.
One of the things that occurred to me as I read through your work was obviously the aim here is to keep children out of custody at all costs. But you've told us and you've written to us to indicate that any children in your care aren't released unless the support systems are set up and they're able to avail of support systems and all of the things that people need to stay on track when they're with you. And I'm wondering then, is that the case for those who are on the fringes of the system but haven't yet reached you? And that is the fact that they can't avail of services. I suppose this is maybe an issue for Raise. The fact that they can't access the service, then resulting in them hitting your door whenever they are. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's definitely the case, Chair. So one of our parents recently met the parent. We have a parents group, and I recently met them down in Woodlands, and one of the parents said to me, my reaction when my child ended up in Woodlands was, phew, finally they're going to get some support. And I've heard that several times. So a child at some points needs to reach custody, or certainly in our system, to get the support that they need. And it's not justice support, it's mental health support, it's substance misuse support, it's and we importantly don't just work with the child. We try, as far as our resources permit, to work with the whole family and take a whole family approach, because our workers aren't there 24/7. The family is. So a lot of what we do is support the family with the tools and expertise and experience and tips to manage and support their young person. And we also do some quite innovative things around. We've got a very small discretionary fund called an earlier stage diversion strand 1, where our staff can apply for up to £500 per child for particular things to support that child. So a really simple one that I always quote because I think it's really powerful: a child who, because of their mental health issues, acted out violently. our staff worked with them on coping mechanisms and techniques, and that £500 was used in part for a punch bag in the young man's room with a pair of boxing gloves. And he knew that if he needed to de-stress, he went, rather than punching his brother or his mum, he went into the room and punched the punch bag. So he wasn't reoffending. You know, we would have seen that child again and again and again. So really small and innovative use of a little bit of money just made a tremendous difference with that broader support from our staff.
Actually, I have a question on that kind of, but I'm working my way through the report as we got it. Could I ask you just that there's reference to a report from Queen's on children's diversion forums. When do you anticipate that report?
I've just written the foreword for it, so okay. It should be ready to launch. We're going into print, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping to have an event in November. It's because it's a multi-agency forum, so we're trying to use that as an opportunity to kind of just strengthen some of those partnerships.
Thank you. And then there's reference to a pilot in Newry. Let me just find that. For members who are following along, it's page 96 of our papers. I just need to find where it is in the paper so that I can tell you. Are you familiar with? Yes, there it is there. There's a diversionary disposal has been designed with PSNI and PPS, and it's planned that a pilot's going to start in autumn 2024 in southern area, which is Newry. The pilot will improve outcomes for children who've committed offences which exceed the current community resolution notice threshold, but may still warrant a diversionary disposal. It will involve a 10 to 12 week intervention working with the YJA. What types of offences and behaviours are we looking at there for that?
Do you want to pick that?
It's those that would have typically attracted a diversionary youth conference, so that will be decided by the PPS, but the threshold would be anything that doesn't attract court disposal. So the PPS are the gatekeepers in terms of the appropriateness of referrals. Okay, that's helpful. I suspect that pilot is something we would like to kind of be updated on and see how that goes. Just as I work through this, please bear with me. Yes, despite considerable improvements made to keep children out of custody, concerns remain over the number of children held in custody each year who do not go on to receive a custodial sentence. This raises the question as to whether the majority of children held on PACE or remand are being held in accordance with the principle of custody as a last resort. What are the figures around that, please? Do you know, or you could say?
Yeah, so we have, our statistics from NISR, our workload statistics, are going to be published next Thursday. I haven't obviously seen them yet, but roughly every year we have something in and around 110, 120 children admitted to custody. The majority of those will be on remand or for PACE. But actually, we wouldn't necessarily agree with the point that others raise. And Mary, do you want to kind of pick up on that?
Certainly. A lot of our children don't end up getting a custodial sentence at the end of the remand because technically they have time served and the work has been done with those young people. So had they not have been on remand for that period of time and had the work not been completed, they would have received a custodial sentence. So that's really not a true reflection of what actually occurs, because had they been in court on the first week after the offence was committed, they would have been sentenced to custody. However, because they've spent a period of time on remand, they've work done, basically.
So it's an entirely different situation from adults who are essentially encouraged not to engage.
Exactly.
But with children, that's really useful to know. Thank you. I just have a couple more things, if that's all right. Around the case studies, how do you find the balance between, Stephen, you made mention there of a punch bag, and I absolutely understand why that would be necessary. But there's things there like, a child saying that getting a bike made a world of difference. How do you strike the balance between making sure that it's helpful and not perceived as a reward? And the other thing I want to know is there's reference to some children having 11 orders. And I suppose I'm asking myself, how on earth do you receive 11 orders? Is it all from the one incident where there's a raft of offences, or is it perpetual kind of stuff going on? It's the notion of reducing to one order for everything, but it's making me think if somebody's got 11 is something not working? You know, I can understand how it's ridiculously difficult for parents to keep track of that and for everybody else too. But how to get 11? What's going on in the system? What is the process, and how does that work, please?
So on the earlier stage diversion, that small amount of money, that £500, it's linked to helping reduce the issues and support the child to deal with their offending behaviour. So we would, depends on the needs of the child, but it might be membership of a boxing club, the punch bag. As I said, 40% of our offences are violence against the person. It's pro-social activities, so it could be, for example, quite a number of our young people would get their construction card, which is sort of a health and safety card you need before you can work in the construction industry, forklift certificates, gear for work or for interviews. It might be gym membership, because that could be a way of a child perhaps with trauma or emotional issues managing their energy or so it's anything that we do is linked to their offending behaviour, and is try to address that.
They don't perceive it as a reward; they perceive it as
No, it's very clear, and sometimes it's the family. So, mum can be struggling, and we've used that to pay for some counselling for mum because she needs a bit of support. You know, we're quite innovative, and I give my staff quite a lot of latitude to use their professional judgment, which I think is really important. On the 11 orders. Some of those will be because of a single incident. So, for example, in a care home, you could have a situation where the police are called. Because the police are called, the child kicks off because of their own trauma, and you could have a number of offences rolled up into one. It could be because sometimes a child will not have got through the system to be referred to us in a timely way, and then they could have ratcheted up other offences, and that I think is quite often the case, Colleen, isn't it?
It's a range, as Stephen has described. It can be maybe one or two offences where there's been multiple offences committed during that duration. Occasionally it's a prolific offender, occasionally it's a young person who goes out and steals, but that is more unusual. It's usually, unfortunately, a child with a care experience who's got multiple needs and can't cope in a situation and acts out in a particular way, and unfortunately one offence turns into 5 over the course of a night.
That's really helpful. Can I thank you very much for indulging me with questions there? I know we went through quite a bit, but I just really wanted to understand some of the thought behind your report, and thanks to members for their patience and bearing with me as I asked them. Could I thank you very much for your attendance here today? Your evidence has been really helpful to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Members, if I could ask you to move to agenda item 6, which is Statutory Rule 2024-147, the Police Service of Northern Ireland and Police Service of Northern Ireland Reserve Injury Benefit Amendment Number 2 regulations. And I would refer you to pages 253 to 347 in your meeting pack. So, a couple of things. The purpose of this statutory rule, and this is the one that a number of us have declared an interest on, the purpose of this statutory rule is to place the guidance to medical practitioners on injury on duty awards, to carry out injury on duty assessment provided to selected medical practitioners and independent medical reviewers on a statutory footing, to revoke the Police Service of Northern Ireland and Police Service of Northern Ireland Reserve Injury Benefit Amendment Regulations 2024 and correct errors that were identified by the examiner statutory rules in the Police Service of Northern Ireland and Police Service of Northern Ireland Reserve Injury Benefit Amendment Regulations 2021. Just a couple of reminders on this issue, members. At our meeting on the 30th of May, the committee unanimously agreed that we were content with the statutory rule. The Department has confirmed that there have been no changes to the policy content since the proposal was considered by the committee. These regulations are subject to the negative resolution procedure, so we would need to pray against them were we to so decide. But there's a few issues to consider before we even reach that point. So the regulations were laid in the Business Office on the 28th of June, and they came into operation on the 2nd of July. which meant they were in breach of the 21-day rule. The department has stated that this breach was considered necessary in order to ensure that the revocation contained in the regulations was brought forward as soon as possible and that replacement regulations are in place. In light of that, the examiner's statutory rule stated in her report, which was published yesterday, that the rule will be drawn to the attention of the Assembly in relation to the breach of the 21-day rule and in relation to another drafting error which she states was minor. The examiner is content with the department's explanation for the breach of the 21-day rule and is also content with the department's proposed approach to amending the drafting error, and her report can be found at pages 5 to 9 of your tabled report. First of all, can I ask if you're content to note that report from the examiner's statutory rules? Yes, thank you. An oral evidence session from officials was requested, but the relevant official was unable to attend this afternoon, so the department has instead provided further correspondence, which can be found at pages 3 and 4 of the tabled pack. Are you content to note that correspondence?
Noted.
Thank you. Now, this is where this gets a wee bit complex. At our meeting of the 27th of June, contained within the correspondence, there was correspondence from an individual who had numerous concerns about the review of police pensions, and we noted those at the time. And that correspondence is included in our packs at pages 343 to 347. And that's why I had sought oral evidence, because there are some serious questions in there, and I think that we would want to reassure ourselves around this. The issues, the gist of the issue of the complaint and the concern raised within the correspondence was that the Northern Ireland Audit Office report on which the consultation was based contained fundamental errors. Now, the department's response somewhat naturally is, well, that's a matter for the Northern Ireland Audit Office. However, if the correspondent with us is right, it would indicate that all of this has been born from flawed information to start with. So I think that we may want to tease that out a bit. Now, there are consequences for us were we not to go along with the rule, or to pray against the rule, not just for us but also for the officers involved. So I'm going to ask Caroline if she would outline maybe some potential options for us, because certainly I would like to ensure that as we proceed, the issues that have been raised by this correspondent would be taken seriously and that we would have done our due diligence. But bearing in mind these have already progressed, I think we need to consider, if members are agreed, what the options are available to us in that regard. Are members content with that? Yes? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. So, as members are aware, the committee cannot amend or adapt a statutory rule. This one, as the Chair has mentioned, is negative resolution procedure. So the committee can either, you can note that you have no objection to the rule, or you can recommend that the Assembly would annul the statutory rule, and you have to lay a prayer of annulment. The statutory period in which you can do that is quickly coming to an end. It's the 30th of September. You have to work backwards from that because you have to lay the motion with the business office and so on. So the latest you could really do that would be Tuesday the 24th, which would be very much cutting it fine. Ideally it would be this Tuesday would be better for the business office. However, you do perhaps have a little bit of time next week. So the department has said, if they were to come up, all they would be saying was this is to do with the audit office, and it's beyond their remit, the issue that's raised in this correspondence. I think it's worth noting on the 24th of October, which is past the period for this rule, but beyond then, officials will attend the committee to discuss the consultation on the proposed changes to the injury on duty scheme, which has arisen actually as a result of the Audit Office report, which recommended that the scheme should be reviewed to ensure that the financial support currently given that it meets modern day requirements and remains sustainable in the future. So that's going to give members a good opportunity to discuss this, to interrogate, to ask officials and to get a full understanding, and then could influence then the way forward subsequently.
Yes, and so our option would be then to flag those issues up. I suppose in the interim period, we have furnished the department with the correspondence, which is why they have replied to say it's a matter for the Audit Office. But I do think we need to understand, well, if this was flagged to you in the course of the consultation, did you take it on board and did you speak to the Audit Office? And I think that we need to tease that out with the department. I also think it may be worthwhile, if members were agreed, that we furnish the Northern Ireland Office, the Northern Ireland Audit Office with the queries and see what responses and answers they have to give. And we could copy in, if members were agreed, the Public Accounts Committee into that, just to make sure as we go down the line that we've done our due diligence and that the issues were brought to the attention of everybody concerned in case there is a problem down the line. And I mean, I'm not sufficiently over pensions and the interim duty process and all of that to know the extent to which this would impact, but I think having received the correspondence, we would do well to check. So what I'm suggesting at this stage is then we would agree that the statutory rule proceeds and we wouldn't pray against it. However, we would interrogate the questions raised with the department whenever they come in front of us over the consultation, find out whether or not the department took those queries on board, and we write to the Audit Office to see what they have to say about the issues raised, and then we can consider, we still have time, about whether or not if it were merited, that we would ask the department to look at the statutory rule again. Does that seem a fair and reasonable way to proceed? Or do members have any queries about what I'm asking? Deirdre?
Okay, I mean, I've obviously looked at this and I know it came up previously, and it's a policing board. I think there's some issues being conflated in terms of the letter that was sent in from the individual pertaining to issues which are policing board responsibility, and obviously they're saying they don't have the expertise. It should go to the police themselves, and I think that needs to happen as well. It should come out of the policing board. But this is about, I mean, this is after a court judgment where it's looking to place the guidance, the medical guidance, on a statutory footing. That's what we're being asked to do through these. So I would be content, I mean, we would be supporting the regs going ahead in terms of this SR. And then, I mean, we're happy if people have questions that they want to kind of open up and to look at with department officials, then by all means, you know, but it is just emphasising that, I mean, we would support the policing board's position that this issue, because there isn't the expertise there, needs to come out of the policing board and probably sit within the PSNI more broadly. But on the back of that court judgment, that it does need to be on a statutory footing.
Yes, because
or
it
there
has the
could be other
potential
action.
to open the policing board to additional cases.
100%, and they don't have the expertise to deal with it. So
I would agree with that. I think it's vital that we don't hamper the progress of the SR, but there are issues that have been raised here that I think need teased out, and we need to protect ourselves that we're not ignoring something that has now been brought to our attention. Is that a fair comment?
Chair, are you saying that we agree the SR, but then have an oral session where we can tease out the issues, and if we're not content, reverse our decision?
No.
What do we?
So, essentially, on our work plan, the department was bringing forward the responses to the consultation, and we were going to have a session around the consultation anyway, and they wanted to do that in writing. As a result of the questions contained within that, I had asked for that to be an oral briefing, and and Clark and I had a conversation about, so they're bringing the consultation to us after the stuff has already been laid and implemented anyway, and more than that, the stuff has been implemented since the beginning of July, but the guidance is only coming in front of us now, and people don't have the guidance yet, so there are a number of things. No. So what I'm saying, Doug, is that if we don't proceed with the statutory rule, it leaves the policing board open to additional cases, and it leaves the officers in a state of limbo. The department was writing to us about the consultation process anyway. If we bring them in front of us and ask for an oral briefing, then we can raise some of these questions. Now they'll say, and they have said in correspondence, well, that's a matter for the audit office. But I think what we need to tease from them is, okay, well, did these issues come up in the consultation? And when you did find out, what steps did you take to ensure the information that you were given from the audit office was the right basis on which to proceed?
Yeah.
Now, bearing in mind that this SR that we've got is essentially a redo because there were errors in the first one, that means there's still scope that if there were errors in this one, we could ask them to look at it again if we needed to ask them to look at it again. But in the meantime then too, if we write to the Northern Ireland Audit Office and say, we've been advised that there are some fundamental errors and that has formed the basis of a DOJ consultation, can you answer some of these questions? And then that will give us assurance one way or the other, and then we'll know whether or not we need to be asking the DOJ to look at the statutory rule again. But in the meantime, the statutory rule proceeds. So it's a parallel process. Is that a fair explanation of it?
In the meantime, and I've already declared a conflict in this one, in the meantime, on the 26th of this month, there was a court case with police officers against the policing board in regards to retrospective injured on duty awards. So we're not getting embroiled in that in any way by... No. So we're okay?
Yes, because that issue is about a decision that the policing board took. This is about the fundamental premise of the figures on which the consultation was based and whether or not those are accurate. And the figures for the consultation came from the audit office. So the department is saying if there's a problem with the figures that we use for the consultation, well, they were given to us by the audit office. You need to ask them the questions. And that's fine, we do. But the other side of it is, okay, well, whenever it was brought to your attention that potentially there might be issues within that, what did you do to reassure yourself that the consultation is on a firm footing?
Okay, I'm content.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that clear, or have I made it worse?
No, it's
good. Is that fair enough? All right, so members agreed to all of that then? PAC, audit office, and we asked the DOJ to come in for an oral briefing on the consultation, and we allow the SR to proceed without praying against it for now until we get some additional information, and we've got room to rectify if we need to. Yes? Okay, so on that basis then I'm going to put the question that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2024-147, the Police Service of Northern Ireland and Police Service of Northern Ireland Reserve (injury benefit) amendment number 2, regulations 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next agenda item is an SL1, which is the Coronavirus Act 2020 extension of provisions relating to live links for courts and tribunals, the number 2 order Northern Ireland 2024, and I would refer you to pages 348 to 388 of your meeting pack. So this is just the live links coming up again. We've had several of these. We've been through the issues around why we're perpetually extending COVID, and we know that the Minister's going to bring forward substantive proposals in the Justice Bill that's forthcoming. So let me just work through them, what the clerks have given me. So the Department proposes to bring forward a statutory rule using the powers in the Coronavirus Act 2020 to further extend the provisions to allow courts and statutory tribunals to receive evidence wholly or in part through the use of audio or video links. This will remain in force for a further 6 months beyond 24th September 2024. The Committee considered the most recent rule extending the provisions at its meeting on the 25th of April 2024. Members had previously agreed to ask the Department for its views on whether the continued use of the powers was proportionate and appropriate, and to request details of its plans to make permanent provision for the use of audio and video links. At its meeting on the 29th of February 2024, the Committee noted the Department's response, advising that the Minister was satisfied that there remains a clear role for the continued use of the provisions to tackle the backlog of cases that accrued during and since the pandemic. The Department also advised of the Minister's intention to include live link provisions in the first departmental bill, which at that time was planned to be introduced before the summer. The reliance on the powers in the 2020 Act is therefore an interim measure. Based on that information, the committee agreed to recommend that the rule be approved by the Assembly. However, the department subsequently advised that it plans to bring such provisions by way of amendment to the bill at consideration stage. The committee has expressed its concern to the department on numerous occasions about bringing such substantive measures by way of amendment, as it could result in the committee being unable to fulfil properly its scrutiny role. The department has since written to the committee to advise of the publication of a report that sets out the department's plans for new legislation to provide for the future use of live links in courts and tribunals, and this corresponds, and the report can be found at pages 360 to 388 of the committee pack. So could I ask members if they would note the report on audio and video live links? Noted, yes. The rule is going to be subject to the confirmatory resolution procedure. Are members content with the proposed statutory rule, or do you require any further information? I mean, this is a repeat. Yeah, that's great. So then I'm going to put the question, because I have to formally, that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2024-147, the police service. No, why does it? No, sorry. Sorry. Yes, that's fine. That's fine. We're content with that, and that's that one done. I was thinking to myself, more police regulations. There's something awry. Apologies. Right, agenda item 8 is the forward work programme. An updated forward work programme and a proposed DOJ forward work programme are at pages 390 to 403 of the meeting pack. The first briefings on the forthcoming Justice Bill will take place next week, hopefully, with a raise oral briefing session and a session with the Bill Office. Are members content to agree the document, or do you wish to raise any issues? All okay, thank you. Agenda item 9 is correspondence, which really formed the bulk of our pack today. So there's a correspondence memo and 39 items of correspondence running from pages 404 to 1449 of your pack. So I'm going to draw your attention to a number of the items, and then you'll have an opportunity to comment on any other items of correspondence in which you've got a particular interest. Item 19, so this is correspondence from the Criminal Justice Inspection, and that's at pages 1201 to 1203, regarding a request for the committee to contribute to the 20th anniversary of Sagini. There's a quote on page 1203 on behalf of the committee. Are members content with the quote and happy to send it through on behalf of the committee to Sagini?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 21, which is at pages 1214 to 1254, and it's again from Sagini, which is a report on probation practice in Northern Ireland, a follow-up review of the inspection recommendations. Can I ask you to note this item?
Noted.
And can I ask you to agree to write to the department to ask why the primary legislation programme does not include measures to give effect to recommended changes to the probation board's governance arrangements?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Item 27 is correspondence from the Policing Board, which is at page 1271 of the meeting pack, which is regarding the PSNI's Right Care, Right Person programme. The committee agreed to hold a concurrent meeting with the Committee for Health on Thursday the 7th of November to consider this initiative. Agreed, yes?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you. Item 32 is correspondence from the Independent Reporting Commission at pages 1327 of the pack, regarding a request for an informal meeting with the Deputy Chair and me. So the IRC has requested an informal meeting on Monday the 23rd of September. Are members content that the Deputy Chairperson and I would attend?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. Thank you. So we'll go to that and we'll update you at the next meeting after the informal meeting. Item 37 then, which is correspondence from Sammy Wilson MP at pages 1434 to 1436 of the meeting pack, regarding airsoft gun usage and the legislation in Northern Ireland being different from legislation in the rest of the UK. I'm being asked to ask you to note this item and consider writing to the department to provide a copy of this correspondence, and ask for an update on the review of the legislative framework for firearms. Are members content?
Yep.
I think that'd be necessary, because I am concerned, right, if there's people who compete and they're being put at a disadvantage, then it would be important for us to know when this review is going to take place. And if it isn't then what options are available to people who compete? You know, could there be special dispensation, or is there a way to work things for people who are in a competitive environment? Are members content with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 38 then refers to correspondence from an individual at page 1437 of this meeting pack, which is a complaint about a taxi licence and the seizure of a vehicle. Further correspondence from the individual on the same matter has been received by the committee office and can be accessed from the committee office on request. Are members content to note this item?
Noted.
And are you content to forward the correspondence to the Committee for Infrastructure, where it may more naturally lie?
Agreed.
Thank you. I also want to seek your agreement that future items of correspondence from this individual won't be included in the meeting packs, and committee staff should forward them to the Committee for Infrastructure.
Yeah, agreed. Makes
Thank
sense.
you. There are a number of annual reports and accounts that were received by the committee. Yes, Justin.
We've skipped past without me intervening at the appropriate time. Could we go back to item 4 of correspondence, please?
Yes, Justin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the stuff that the committee, that the clerk wants us to raise, and then I'll open it to any other items that people want to raise. And at that stage, I think it might suit you to come in. Is that okay? Thank you. So a number of annual reports and accounts were received by the committee office and are listed at pages 412 and 13 of the pack. A full copy of any of the reports can be provided on request to a member of the Justice Committee staff. All right? Mm-hmm. Are members content to note the other items of correspondence as set out in the correspondence memo, or do you have any comments? And Justin, I know that you do. Go ahead.
Yes, it's item 4, which is a letter from the department. In relation to the genesis of this letter, I would like to note the seriousness of this error whereby departmental officials provided incorrect information to the committee trying to perform our scrutiny role. We are all only human, I do appreciate, and these things can happen, and I'm grateful that for the department for recognising this error. However, it concerns me that the Hansard report from the evidence session reflects something totally different to what I asked. I asked why have reports that are required to be led within 2 years of the commencement of sections 29 and 34 of the Domestic Abuse and Civil Proceedings Act NI 2021 not being led. Is work underway to deliver those, and how does their not being led impact on the overall delivery of the strategy for victims? And the Hansard report reflects an incorrect statement given by the department that all but one report was not led within the imposed timelines. Therefore, I do want it to be noted today that we were misled whilst performing our scrutiny role, and that is a very serious matter. Following on from this, I would propose that committee responds to the department to note concern at the seriousness of this error. I think it's also important to ask for a concrete timescale for the reports to be published and to outline the impact that this delay is having on victims coming into contact with our justice system. And I would finally like to recognise the diligence and meticulous attention to detail of our committee clerks and their team, and recognise that the department officials had given an incorrect answer to the committee, and following up on this in writing to the department themselves. Without their dedication and attention to detail of their team, this error may otherwise have gone under the radar, and so for that I am very grateful.
Hear, hear. So Justin, you've made proposals in there that we write to the department, haven't you?
Yeah.
Right, are members content that we do that?
Yeah.
Along the lines that Justin has outlined, yes? Thank you. Does anybody else have anything in the correspondence? I've got a couple of things. If you turn to page 426, this is about our post-legislative scrutiny stuff around domestic abuse protection notices and domestic abuse protection orders. Something's kind of struck me about that was, you know, some of these figures are really stark. We've also seen the department's budgets and we know that they're under pressure. However, the Assembly has passed this legislation. So I don't think that we can just leave this where it is, and a number of us who were at the Access to Justice APG on Tuesday heard reference to some of this from Women's Aid. I think that as we move into our post-legislative scrutiny work, I think this issue needs to be raised. So are members content that we would, again, return to this correspondence whenever we hit our post-legislative scrutiny work. Yes, Deirdre?
Yeah, no, it's just, I had it in my notes just in terms of the figure, because that's what stood out to me, between the 14 and I think it's 17 million that it could go up to. And then you've obviously had the June monitoring report in terms of the bids that were met or weren't met. And then there's obviously ongoing things that are going to come around McLeod, but also clarity on the transformation bids and what's going to be met or not. So I think, I mean, I don't know if officials are due in soon again, aren't they, around October monitoring? So it may be worthwhile kind of bringing all these issues together as part of that, where we can maybe probe it a wee bit more.
Because I must say, the thing that struck me about this was, if you anticipate the costs escalating to that extent, it doesn't strike me there's a lot of faith in some of the strategies that have been put before us.
In terms
of tackling domestic abuse and domestic violence. Stuart.
Chair, thank you. Thank you for your remarks about the committee, the all-party committee on access to justice. I received today the slides and further information from Women's Aid, who made a powerful presentation at that, and I'm very content to share that with the Justice Committee for those of you who weren't able to be there.
Thank you, Stuart. That'll be really helpful. The other thing I just want to draw to members' attention is in the same correspondence, where we're advised that the annual cost of the DAS service is £131,363, and that's one DAS worker across both sites. I think, personally, I would like a breakdown on that. 131,000 for one person across two sites.
Just associated costs as well, but yeah, we can get clarity. It could be associated costs as well, or we get clarity.
I think I would like to see, because if we're presented with that and it's a matter of public record, I think I would like to see, a breakdown.
Yeah, no problem.
At page 1271, there is a letter from the chair of the policing board about right person, right care. I think it probably would be helpful for the policing board then to be aware that we're about to have a joint briefing with the health committee on that particular issue. Just so that they know that,
keep them in the loop.
Yes. The other thing is...
watching, if they want to.
Yes, they can come and join. At page 1323, there's correspondence from the Minister to the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee. And as part of that correspondence, I noted that the Northern Ireland Road Safety Partnership returned 2.2 million over the last 3 years to the Department of Finance, and that money should be used to promote road safety. So that's not a small amount of money, and I just think we should note that. We've dealt with the Sammy Wilson thing, and that's it. There are a couple of invitations there that I couldn't see, but the clerk is going to furnish me with the information. Right. So, has anybody else anything else to raise on correspondence? No? And you're content with everything that we've asked to be done, yes? Thank you.
Sorry, just the one on the 9.33. It was the presentation today, the Equality and Human Rights Commissions into meeting their requirements in terms of the Article 2. Did we get a copy of that? It was only launched today, but I couldn't make it. But do you know if they sent us a copy, or we can get a copy of that report?
Right now, I'm sure we'll be able to get it if it hasn't come
Or
in.
I can contact them directly. I don't know if anybody else is interested, but...
No, I think, because that's when we were invited to, but then it was...
we couldn't get it.
We would usually send it, but yes, we can chase it up anyway.
Is that okay? Thank you.
The other issue, I suppose, is within our correspondence, I forgot about this one, but there's the correspondence from John Boucher, which is the letter to the Prime Minister, and then there's the correspondence from the Permanent Secretary to back. Now, obviously this has been raised in the Assembly, and members may consider that the floor of the Assembly is sufficient. However, the fact that it's been raised in the floor of the Assembly means I think it would be remiss of us were we not even to acknowledge that it had happened. So are members content that the issue has been addressed on the floor of the Assembly, or is there anything that you would like raised with the Chief Constable or the Minister, or are you content that it's all sorted out?
I'm content, Chair. Let's not flog this one.
No, that's fine. I think for us to pretend it hadn't happened.
No, I don't mean you're
been-
flogging it. I mean that's us not. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
content.
I would like clarity on whether permanent secretaries at departments can go lone wolf.
In what sense? So just
Writing letters reprimanding the constable, the chief constable. Was that a lone wolf letter, or did that letter have the support of the minister?
well, we tried to tease that out in the debate on Monday. Now, in the debate on, I think it was Monday, the minister indicated that the permanent secretary is the accounting officer for the department. The minister is not. It's the permanent secretary. Therefore, in that role, the permanent secretary can write to people around their rules and responsibilities with regard to financial matters. And that's why, the chief constable has two statutory obligations. One is to essentially live within his budget and be responsible for that. But he's got to balance that with keeping people safe, and he's indicated that he can't. So that, I suppose, is where the issue is. The fundamental issue as to whether or not the minister knew about the letter, supported the letter, endorsed the letter. She made a public statement about it. But, I mean, if you wish the committee to write to ask, does the minister stand by the letter, then we can put it to the committee and see if they're agreed to it. Do you want that done? Deirdre?
I would prefer not to do that if we can. Notwithstanding, if there's a question somewhere to be asked, I don't know if it's through the Justice Committees, that may be most appropriate, because it would be a question for all permanent secretaries. But, I think it was debated in terms of the motion. I think categorically, Chief Constable does have a right and has done in the past in terms of had direct engagements in terms of finances. And then obviously we know if we do get any financial arrangement, the way that that's dispersed and managed. But I think also what he did say is that there is a good working relationship with the minister and the department, and they're going to continue to work collaboratively. So I think that's where we need to keep the focus, from my point of view, is ensuring going forward that we have that collaborative approach. If there's a broader issue, I don't know if that's maybe a Jane Brady in terms of the head of civil service more broadly. I would try and detangle them in some way without, because I think we've done the politics in the chamber, would be my view. That I think most parties were content to that extent. And just to note, I think there's a couple of issues. Obviously, I think it's good to note it as a committee. I would agree with you. And there's obviously the other issue around the public disorder. Even to note that letter, because that was a serious thing over the summer. Again, the Assembly have debated it. But again, maybe just as a committee to note the two of them. Unless people have a different view, but...
Stuart?
Again, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, as the previous speaker said, the matter has been debated politically, and people have had their opportunities to have their say. We have to accept the veracity of the process that has been advised to us by the Minister and others. People feel that there's a wider issue about the role of accounting officers. I'm sure they can take that up, but I think people will find that there's very clear guidance and rules around the responsibilities of accounting officers, and who they consult and who they don't consult with regards to all of this. So yeah, I think the issue has been dealt with politically. I think from a resourcing perspective and a relationship perspective between the department and the PSNI, we need to work collaboratively and together to ensure that we get the best possible budget outcome that delivers those desirables for PSNI and indeed for the broader justice family as well.
I agree. I think there's a chain of commands question here which still is unanswered. I recognise also that the Minister has consistently talked about the operational independence of the police constable. Is the permanent secretary, are the permanent secretaries of departments allowed to go lone wolf on issues where they have concerns around financial issues without the approval of their minister? I'd like that clarified.
Right, Chair, I think
accounting officers are ultimately answerable to the CEO. Who is the CEO of the department? The Justice Minister.
All right, I think, Chair, that's an unfortunate framing of the situation. Permanent secretaries are accounting officers, and they have a very clear responsibility and role. They don't go rogue or lone wolf in respect of the responsibilities.
Well, was that letter not lone wolf? Was that letter lone wolf letter, or was that letter written with the approval of the minister or otherwise?
I think those are two separate things, Justin, potentially. So the first issue is whether or not the permanent secretary has the authority to write to the chief constable, for example, in this case. Does he have the authority to do that as the accounting officer?
Absolutely.
And the next issue is, and I would lean towards yes, he does, but I can't be certain, but I would lean towards yes. The other issue around whether or not the minister was aware of the letter and endorsed the letter is a separate issue for her. Now, Justin, in terms of reading the room, it doesn't strike me that the committee would have support. The committee would support that option. So that leaves, I suppose, the issue of what options are open to you. And I think that you could table written questions, or you could write directly to the private office yourself and write to Jane Brady to clarify about the roles and responsibilities of accounting officers and whether or not. And then after that, if you have issues you need to raise in here, then we'll certainly hear them. But I think that, best option here is that it would be a draw, and then it falls. So you have other avenues open, and you should, if you wish, avail of those. Is that okay? Thank you. Item 10 is chairperson's business. I had an informal meeting with Jackie Durkin during the summer recess to discuss a number of justice-related matters. Those issues were around forthcoming reports. What else was there in that? It was forthcoming reports. Well, that was kind of the inspection programme ahead, what they're looking at, key themes, those kinds of things. So it was pretty much just an update. There wasn't anything. If there was anything of concern, I would have brought it to you. I also had an informal meeting with the chair and vice chair and chief executive of the policing board during the summer recess about the board's work. So that covered a raft of things, again, about the PSNI's budget, the review of the board, all of the issues that we've discussed in here. And again, that's part of the scheduled routine where we will, the chair and vice chair will meet with the chair and vice chair of the board and the chief executive on a quarterly basis. So that was the general gist. I don't think I've omitted anything from that meeting, have I? That was the rough outline. Then we also had an informal meeting with Glenn Roberts and representatives of Retail NI during summer recess to discuss a number of concerns they have, particularly around shoplifting and attacks on staff. Some of the information that came from that meeting was startling, and I don't think any of us had grasped the full extent of the epidemic that there is around shoplifting, and people's feeling that it's fine, and that it's maybe not being taken seriously as a crime, but the massive impact that it has on people's businesses and on their lives, never mind their livelihoods. So I think that will be an issue that we will come to again in the future, because I think it would be beneficial for members to understand the full scale of that. But Glenn furnished us with his report, but I think he has furnished everybody with that report. But I would encourage members to take a look at that and to speak to your local businesses, because certainly I was taken aback to understand that it's not people who are shoplifting, not everybody who's doing that is doing it out of need. And that was the main takeaway from that. Right, members, at our meeting on the 27th of June, the Committee of Justice considered correspondence from the Committee for the Economy regarding correspondence from the Association of British Insurers about transparency relating to insurance premiums in Northern Ireland. The Committee agreed to schedule an informal meeting with the Association of British Insurers, which will be open to members of the Committee for the Economy to attend to discuss the issue. So this is around the premiums and what's adding to the cost of premiums and all of that. So can I seek your agreement that the informal meeting would take place virtually on Tuesday the 15th of October at 1 o'clock? Yes, thank you. Also, I've received an invitation from the Chief Constable to attend the PSNI's Highly Commended Awards ceremony, which will take place on Tuesday the 24th of September. I would like to go to that if members are content.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. I've also received an invitation from the Law Society to attend Law Tech UK in Northern Ireland. It's a conference they're having which is going to take place on Tuesday the 26th of November. They've asked me to attend that. Obviously, my attendance, I would like to attend that if members are willing, but it's going to have to be subject to Assembly business because we don't know what will be happening with the bill by then. So, are members content with that too?
Great. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any other business you want to raise? Justin?
Sure. You may have seen the newspaper article this week by Alison Morris in the Belfast Telegraph that almost 1,000 convicts have been recalled to prison following licence breaches in the north in the last 5 years. I was taken aback by the article and the nature of some of the crimes committed by those released on licence, and it's astonishing to me that we've heard in this very room over one third of our prisoners are unsentenced, which is leading to overcrowding in our prisons, and so our response seems to be to release dangerous criminals. Overcrowding is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, but how can we turn to victims of violent crimes and say, sorry, we haven't enough room for your person responsible for the crimes that harmed you or your family? It seems to me really unreasonable. I believe that I believe firmly in rehabilitation, and everyone deserves a second chance. However, I do have concerns that we could be letting this trend continue at the price of safety for women and children and those most vulnerable in our society. We've heard time and time again about the experience of victims being re-traumatised by the justice system and the need to improve the experience of victims and rebuild trust in the justice system. I don't think we would be performing our roles as representatives and as committee members if we didn't take notice of this situation. I and many victims' organisations have serious doubts about the efficacy and safety of this. So I'm putting this to the committee and asking, would it be appropriate for us to bring the Minister before us to answer questions on this issue, which I think is a very grave and serious matter.
Okay. A couple of things. I haven't seen the article, so actually it would be helpful, Justin, if you'd maybe outline some of the reasons that people are being returned. But I think that there's two distinct issues. One is people being released because of overcrowding. I think that that's happening in England and Wales. It's not happening here. The reason that people are being released here is for a very different reason, which is part of the sentencing process is, as you know, that they, by and large, you get your sentence, you serve half of it, and the next half is on licence as you're rehabilitated back into society. And that's why people abscond home, because you've got to give them a chance and see how they behave. I don't know why people are being recalled, but I'd be really interested to hear and to understand then how they assess whether or not it's fine to release people on licence, how often they're brought back and why, and what happens when they are brought back, and all of that. Whether we bring the Minister in at this stage is up to the committee to decide. Personally, I would like some more information before we would go straight to the Minister, but if the committee takes a different view. But certainly I think the issue of that number of people being recalled maybe is something we would like to look at and find out, okay, well, what's actually going on here, because the Minister's going to be bringing forward a sentencing bill, and it would be helpful to have some information around that, albeit that it's the next bill down the line. But I'm glad that you raised it. Are you content that we'd get more information and get a briefing on it first from officials? Are you happy with that?
Share the article as well. Would you be able to send it in if you have it?
I haven't seen the article.
The Belfast Telegraph on Monday, I believe. I think Doug was quoted in the article as well, so Doug's familiar with it.
It's a question I asked. It's just, you know, where they pluck questions out of written questions, just use that.
Or can we get access? I don't read the Telegraph, so I didn't see it. So
yeah, I'll be able to get it circulated.
The clerk's going to circulate that, so that's.
I know. Thank you. Okay.
That's great, and then we can we'll schedule in that briefing. No, but I think it's an issue. I mean, it's an issue. You know, and even, you know, people who've been released on compassionate grounds, that their life's going to end and then their life doesn't end.
What would be interesting to find out, Chair, is how many of those who are being released from Wales and England prisons reside here, and how they're linking them into the probation board here. That'd be quite interesting. It might be none, it might be 100, I don't know. And the other one, if I can, Chair, is it'd be really good to find out when we can find out what the terms of reference are going to be for the policing board review, because it's just been announced.
Oh, has it? Very good, yes.
Just on this issue, because I think there was a discussion on Talkback today in terms of aspects around sentencing and early release and notification of victims and stuff as well, particularly around domestic violence. But even to get as much of the briefing then, because as you say, we are getting the sentencing bill next year. So if we can get ahead of much of that in terms of where's the gaps, you know, what more needs to be done, then it would be good then over the next period that we can start to slot additional briefings or whatever in, and then hopefully if we do, we will get the minister, I'm assuming at some point in front of us again in the autumn, getting into early winter, you know, that we'll have done as much or got as much of that information as possible in advance.
You're just at the same issue?
I think you may well remember in one of the prison visits that we had, when there was a discussion about prisoners who were released, and what a traumatic situation that is for many who really will quite often go and commit a crime in order to return to prison because they've been so institutionalized. I think it would be very useful to have the figures around reoffending rates or recall rates. It is an important area, but it's not one. It's one which I think, if we have detailed discussion with the prison service, they will tell us about the extraordinary lengths to which they go to assist and prepare people for release back into the community.
I think that's a fair comment. So are we content with all that? Is that going to be another raise issue or just officials or?
Or perhaps prison service might help us with that.
We're actually meeting, well, we're going to McGabry again around rehabilitation and stuff. I mean, that was one of the issues on the last visit we didn't get a chance to look at. So I imagine that'll be part of our information gathering, actually get into the prison to look at that issue. So that's in our work programme anyway.
And there's a couple of separate issues, I presume, about who can recall them and why, because there's another issue around the NIO, isn't there? Recalling people. Right. Are you guys clear on what we're looking for there? Because it was
back.
Okay.
That's what we should.
Is that everything, members? Yes. Justin, thanks for bringing that to our attention, and Doug, those other issues that you flagged up there too, and Deirdre. So agenda item 12 is date, time, place of next meeting, which is going to be next Thursday, the 19th of September at 2 p.m. in this room. Thank you very much, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Committee Room 30, Sound. Committee Room 30, Sound. Committee Room 30, Sound. Committee Room 30, Sound. Committee Room 30, Sound.